Hello Internet, welcome to my Overcoming Anxiety and Panic documentary. In this video, I share my life story with how I developed an anxiety and panic disorder, and then I share my journey to overcome it. Back in 2008, I started filming videos regularly about my anxiety disorder and what I did to try to recover from it. And I posted 100 videos. So what I'm doing for this documentary is I'm taking all of those 100 videos and I'm combining them into a single documentary. So we'll be going back in time to 2008, and then we'll be moving forward to 2012, 2013. But you'll see the date, the year, posted in the upper corner of the video so that you can see what year it is. So right now it is January 2015. And keep in mind, this is a really long video. I think this is going to turn out to be a little over 3 hours long. So you see this menu right here? This menu? Alright, this menu, because the video is so long, I want people to be able to just see what all is in this video, and then you could just click on any one of these little things, on any one of these links, to take you to that part of the video. Because I talk about different things, and I keep in mind to kind of bounce around a little bit. So pause the video right now if you want to take a gander at the menu and figure out what's in it and see what parts you might be interested in. Okay, and then keep in mind too that because this was several years ago, the quality of the video is not going to be, not that great, and there were some video clips that over the years got corrupted, so you'll see, especially towards the beginning of the video, there are some segments where there's no video, it's only audio, and that's, again, because some of the files got corrupted over the years. And then also, as I talk about each thing in the video, there will always be on screen an annotation that you can click if you want to skip ahead to the next section. So because the video is so freaking long, I just want people to be able to navigate the video a little bit easier so that you don't have to sit and watch the whole thing. You can watch whatever parts you're more interested in. And yeah, I do bounce around the topics a little bit. So we talk about one thing and then we move on to something else, then we kind of go back to that. Okay, so without further ado, let's do some time travel. Let's go back to 2008, and we don't need a DeLorean for that. Nope. So, here it goes. Hi folks, my name is Seth, and I have been suffering from anxiety and panic attacks for 8 years. If you are suffering from this potentially debilitating disorder, it really helps to have other people out there that can relate to you and you can relate to them, and it makes the whole process of progression much easier. Growing up, I had a relatively easy childhood. I had a great relationship with my parents. It was just, there were no major problems. My parents had a great marriage, and we were just just had a happy family. And then as I got a little bit older, though, I started to develop these obsessive worries. I would often obsessively worry about whether the dishes I was eating off of were clean or not. I was a major germaphobe. I would often obsess about germs, things like that, being poisoned, and I did have a few general phobias. As I got older, I started becoming afraid of elevators, but it wasn't it wasn't like a feeling of being trapped or anything. I didn't have any of that. It wasn't like an anxiety about being trapped. It was just I didn't like elevators. I avoided them. I was scared to ride them for some reason. I was afraid of the dark, but that's a very common childhood phobia anyway. But the obsessive worries got a little bit worse. I would constantly ask questions. That was a big thing about me. I would constantly ask questions about the future. I would ask my parents if we were planning on going out. I would ask them, how long we were going to be gone, when we were coming back, and I was just a worrywart. I would worry about everything, pretty much. And it got to the point where my parents became concerned about the constant worrying about various things that they set me up with a psychiatrist. And I saw her for a couple of years, and I think I overcame a lot of my worries. And I was about 9 years old then, about 8 or 9. And then as I got older, just kind of got over those worries. But throughout my childhood, I never did have anxiety attacks or panic attacks. It didn't become the problem that I have now. It was just different. It was just the obsessive worry. The groundwork was there. The groundwork for my anxiety condition was definitely there. And I don't think it came from parenting, the way I was raised. It just wasn't. My parents didn't seem to obsessively worry about anything. A lot of times psychologists talk about nature versus nurture, where nature being your chemical makeup, which can predispose some people to anxiety. And then there's nurture, the way you're raised, can sometimes bring about anxiety conditions. But I don't think I had the nurture component of that. I would later find out that certain members of my family also suffer from anxiety. It all makes sense to me now that there might be a chemical imbalance. The therapy that I went through seemed to help with those phobias. I don't know what kind of therapy. I was too young to really remember what kind of therapy I received, but whatever it was, it seems to have worked for that anyway. But of course I would later go on to develop a full-blown anxiety disorder. I'm going to be talking about my first panic attack. I was 22 years old. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we were on a weekend trip to this place a couple hours away from here, and we're having such a great time. My anxiety disorder all came on at once. It was like a ton of bricks hit me. And it all started with one panic attack that seemed to last forever. Here's how it started. We decided to go to take a tour of a cavern. This place that we go to, they do cavern tours where they take you down into a cavern and you go way underground, which is fun and intriguing for a lot of people. And I was all into it and excited. And we start going down into the cavern. It's well lit. It's not dark at all. I mean, it's a little dark, but the lighting's pretty good. And just walking down these stairs cut into the rock, and as you get a little further down, you get to this metal spiral staircase at the bottom. And then I remember not feeling quite right as soon as we entered the mouth of the cavern, and I wasn't sure why I wasn't feeling quite right. I just kind of assumed maybe I had too much coffee that morning for breakfast. Although I had ordered decaf, and it's possible that the waitress gave me regular coffee instead of decaf, and I remember refilling it twice. And I normally don't handle caffeine that well, but I can't prove that that's what happened. But I just felt so jittery and nervous. And I started getting down into the cavern a little deeper, and then my legs started feeling rubbery, like weak in the knees, like just collapse. And then just the feeling of anxiety just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And then I started feeling feelings of panic, like I just wanted to get out of that cave right then and there. My heart was beating fast, I was sweating. I had every single symptom of a panic attack. And then we get to the bottom, and it was kind of warm down there. And it was just like, hard to breathe. And I just wanted to get the hell out of there. And we did. we started climbing back up, and the closer we got back to the top, the better I felt. But it was just such intense panic. Don't think I've had a panic attack that strong before. See, most people during their first panic attacks, they think they're having a heart attack, but not me. I didn't think I was having a heart attack. I thought it was just having too much coffee. And then we came out of the cavern, panic attack went away, but for some reason the anxiety lingered all day. I just felt anxious, nervous, and it did not go away. I thought, well, I'm out of the cave now, why am I still feeling this way? Why am I still feeling anxious? So I kept thinking about the coffee. Well, maybe it wasn't really decaf I was drinking. Maybe it was caffeinated. Maybe I'm just on a caffeine buzz. But it didn't feel like a normal caffeine buzz. It was something else to it. I was trying to enjoy the day, but I just couldn't. We walked through the town, looked through the shops, and I kept trying to calm myself down, like it's going to be alright, but the feeling just wouldn't subside. And then we left for home, and I felt anxious all the way home. Not a good feeling. And by then I figured the caffeine buzz should have worn off, if that's what it was. And I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't understand what I was feeling. I'd never felt that before. Not like that. So I didn't know what was going on. Then we get back home. So I went to bed that night, and I still felt anxious. I had to work the next day. And I had a spontaneous panic attack while I was trying to go to sleep. And that was the same day that it all just came on suddenly. I think I was panicking because I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know why I had this, what was wrong with me. And so I had a panic attack had a panic attack because I was afraid it was never going to end, or that it was going to happen again. Panic attack subsided, and then I had another one. And after the second one, or actually it was the third one of the day, but second one while I was laying in bed. After that one subsided a few minutes later, by then I was so tired I just fell asleep. Got up the next morning because I knew I had to work that day, and I just kept thinking about what happened the day before. How awful I felt. And I felt pretty crummy that morning. Real crummy. And I really didn't want to go to work, so I took a long drive, and it was a very emotional day for me. I just cried because I didn't know what was wrong, and I was still feeling a little bit anxious, and I didn't know when the heck it was going away. I didn't like my job either. Wasn't really happy with my job. It was just not a happy place. I just cried and cried and drove and drove. And then it was time to go to work, and actually by the time I got to work, ironically, I started feeling a little bit better. So that was my experience with my first panic attack, and where my anxiety really got its start. The groundwork may have been started already in my childhood, but this is where it came to the surface. I had the panic attack, the first panic attack, and then felt anxiety for the whole rest of the day, and then the next day felt a little bit, but generally felt better. And then that evening, when I went grocery shopping, I walked into the store, got everything I needed, and then when I got to the end of the line, I started having another panic attack. So by then I knew something was wrong. I had that panic attack standing in line. I'd never had any anxiety in a grocery store before, but this time I did. As the line got shorter and shorter, I got more panicked because, oh, now it's my turn. Now I've got to, reach over and put all my groceries on the conveyor belt. Boy, by the time it was time to pay for those groceries, I was just shaking. I felt like I just had to get out of the grocery store. And this was the first panic attack in a grocery store that I'd had. So this, by then, was like my fourth panic attack total. And this was right at the beginning of all this. I realized that I could no longer go into grocery stores. as time went on, I also realized that I could no longer go into any large building. And that included almost all grocery stores. Couldn't go into any large grocery stores at all, mid-sized ones, and a few small grocery stores, maybe. I could no longer go to a shopping mall, an airport. And what it was about large buildings that bothered me were things like the distance from the front door. The further away I was from the front door or the nearest exit, the worse off I was. Another factor was the length of time that I was in the building. The longer I was in there, the worse I got. I couldn't stand in lines. If it was a long line, forget it. I couldn't do it. Even small lines were a bit of a problem. The shorter the line, the better. It was tolerable. But if it was a big store, forget it. I couldn't even if there was no line in a huge store, I wouldn't be able to do it. You know, especially further from the exit that I was. Another factor is no windows. Any building with no windows made it worse. If there were no windows to the outside, that was all the worse. Large open spaces in buildings bothered me too. For a lot of people, closed-in spaces are claustrophobic, but for me it was the large open spaces I didn't like for some reason. So as far as hospitals and not being able to do them, I tested it one time. My father works in a hospital, and I wanted to see where he worked. So he drove me over to his workplace, which was a fairly large hospital, and he wanted to introduce me to his coworkers. And you know, we'd go in the front door, and I'm feeling okay, but I was real hesitant. And he took me to this cafeteria all the way in the back. All the way in the back, as far from the exit as you can get. And I didn't last. I had to turn around and leave. And as far as being away from home, by and large, distance from home wasn't a huge factor. I mean, if it was really far away, it would be, but it wasn't too much of a factor. If I did go somewhere, though, the further away from my car that I was, the worse off I would be. So if I went out somewhere, I would have to be somewhat close to the car. If I got too far away from where I was parked, then I would start to panic. So my two comfort areas were home and car. As long as I was close, somewhat close to home or car, then I'd be okay. And if I was a passenger in a car, forget it. Because as a passenger in any kind of transport, you have to relinquish any control. You can't just get out of the car whenever you want to if you're not driving. You're at the mercy of the driver. So it was real hard for me to be a passenger in anybody's car going anywhere, even if it was down the street. Couldn't do it, I would panic. And then as far as work was concerned, during the first couple of years with my anxiety disorder, it was tough. It was real tough. Especially because I didn't like my job. I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy there. It wasn't a happy place. So that just added to it. The things at work that caused anxiety would be long lines. Whether I was standing in a line, not at work, just in a store, would be a problem. But it was also a problem being at work and having a line in front of me, a line of customers. That was tough. So the longer the line, the more it bothered me. It also bothered me when I would have to spend a lot of time with the customer, especially doing returns, because I worked in retail. I would have to do returns, and those would be extremely complicated. Knowing that I'd have to be dealing with this customer, even if they were a nice customer, that didn't matter whether they were nice or not. I had to go through with the whole transaction. I couldn't leave until I was done. And it was that feeling of being trapped, not being able to just walk away when I wanted to, was the big problem. And I remember one day I had a really complicated return. I mean, it was just real complicated. The lady came in, she came up to the counter with stuff she wanted. Some of it she wanted to exchange, some of it she wanted to return, and some of it she wanted some of the stuff she pulled off the shelf she wanted to buy. So it was a very complicated process, and I immediately began to feel panicky. And as I dealt with her some more, was going through the motions, that the panic, the anxiety that I was feeling caused me to become confused. So then I couldn't think straight. I was hitting the wrong buttons. I was ending up in different windows, different screens on the computer, and I was just completely lost, and I had to call my supervisor. My supervisor came over, but then having the supervisor next to me added even more pressure, so now I was really panicky. And I had to take their driver's license number and enter it into the computer in order to start the return process. But I kept entering in something else. I kept entering a different number in because I was panicked, and it kept telling me that it was a wrong number. It wasn't accepting it. I tried it over and over, and I just wanted to scream, or I wanted to run the hell away from there. I couldn't take it anymore. Finally, I realized what I was doing. I kept hitting the wrong. I was trying to enter the wrong numbers in, and finally I got it. And my boss standing next to me just was adding insult to injury, just hovering over me, watching me, and it was just a horrible experience. And I finally turned to her at the height of my panic attack and said, "Okay, I think I can handle this from here. You can go." This is what I told my boss, and she said, "No, I'm not going anywhere till you're done." Oh, great. Well, that just added even more to it. And then finally, it was over. And it took me a long time to come off that panic attack. Besides the work issue, my social life started to suffer. I wasn't comfortable in restaurants around a lot of people. The more people there were around me, the worse off I was. If we did go to a restaurant, the stipulation would be I would have to drive, and we'd have to get a table close to a window and the exit. If we sat too far back, that would be a problem, because sitting there, I would know that if I wanted to leave the restaurant, I'd have to walk past all those tables with people at them, and that would throw me into a panic attack. If we were in a restaurant and we were way far back, and I knew I had to walk past all those other tables to get to the door, so that was another factor. So I stopped going out. I started avoiding all these situations. I kept working though, and then I had a problem at the restaurants eating. I didn't like eat. I was afraid to eat in front of other people, so I wouldn't order anything. I would just sit there and maybe order a drink, but that's it. Because eating, I'd have to be looking down, and when I was anxious and I'd be tilting my head down, I'd become very dizzy. And the dizziness was a big problem for me. It was a huge problem with my anxiety. Anxiety would cause me to become dizzy, and that was the one physical symptom of it that would be the most problematic for me. When I become dizzy, I'd become more panicked, so it would just feed into itself. So the only way to break the cycle would be to leave the building, go outside, or go sit in the car. And so I would avoid eating at the restaurants if I couldn't get out of going. I wouldn't even go to the restaurant if I could help it. I wouldn't go out, except to work. So I soon quit that job that I didn't like, that retail job. I quit, and I started working at a lovely hotel. It was a nice sit-down job where it was fast-paced, but a different kind of fast-paced. It was more relaxed. I had a window right next to me, a little tiny office. If I wanted to go outside, all I had to do was, the door was right there. All I had to do was get up and go over here, and I was outside. And it was very comfortable. And so I never had any problems at that time at that job. The only going out that I could do was just to go out driving and then go walk somewhere. But obviously I had to stay close to the car. So my life was very, very limited. And I started to become depressed because of that. At that point I was grappling for answers. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do something before it took over my life, because it was definitely coming to that point where it was just about had me at its grips 100%. I finally decided to do something about it. It was so limiting on my life that I had to do something about it. I was driving along one day. I don't know where I was going, but I heard a commercial on the radio, and it was this lady that had suffered from anxiety and panic attacks for many, many years, and she not only decided to improve herself, but decided to help others, and she came up with a program for overcoming anxiety and panic attacks. And so I ordered her tapes. And they came, and I listened to her tapes, and she was talking about the different methods for overcoming anxiety, what kind of self-therapies work, and how to go about utilizing that and improving your own life. And the one thing that kind of scared me was when she was talking about exposure therapy, having to face the situations that once brought about high anxiety. So it scared me. I really didn't want to have to face the situations that brought on anxiety. That's why people suffer for so many years, is because they keep avoiding the situations that brings on anxiety. And she was saying on the tapes how important it is to face those situations. But still, I was skeptical. I was scared. It just seemed like too much work and effort. Not understanding my condition fully still, I sent the tapes back. I just didn't want to hear the fact that I would have to face those situations directly and possibly have another panic attack. That's what I was afraid of, having another panic attack. And that's what kept me avoiding the situations. Then I decided to try a different approach. I set up an appointment with a mental health specialist. But then I realized that I'd have to go into a panic-provoking situation in order to see the specialist, because she was located inside a large building. And I did not know how I was going to get through that. That was just a huge hurdle for me. Somehow, though, I managed to do it. I got into the office, signed in, but I was really having a lot of anxiety. I didn't quite panic. I'm kind of surprised. It turned out the doctor was running a little late. And that actually turned out to be a good thing, because the longer I sat there, my anxiety gradually improved. But not fully. I was still highly anxious. And then she calls me into her office, and it's way back in the back of the building. So my anxiety obviously started increasing again. But when we get to her office, there's lots of windows, so it made it not as bad. We went over my background. I had just moved out on my own. My parents lived in another state. I moved out here, was now living by myself, and my parents had recently gotten a divorce. But I explained to her that that was not a traumatic experience for me, that the divorcing of my parents, and that living on my own now wasn't a bad thing. You know, I moved out here because of my girlfriend lived here, and obviously I wanted to be close to her. My girlfriend at the time is now my wife. After my conversation with her, her theory was that I was experiencing anxiety because of my parents' divorce and also because of living on my own now. And I was not satisfied with that answer. I just didn't feel like that had anything to do with why I was experiencing anxiety and panic attacks. So she referred me to another specialist. I went and saw him on another day, and that was incredibly difficult, because once again I had to go inside a large building, and I had to go all the way back to where his office was. And we went over my background once again, identical to the last therapist, asked all the same questions, had to go through the whole thing again, and I was tired. And this time I had a lot of anxiety. I'm just sitting there fidgeting the whole time he's talking to me, because I just wanted to leave. And I wasn't happy with him as a therapist. We just didn't click at all. I didn't feel like he was very receptive even. And that was the last time I saw him. So he referred me to a support group. And I thought, okay, well, I'll give that a try. but that was on a separate day, so I had to come back to that same building again. This time, I had even more anxiety. I get up to the window to sign in, and I started having a panic attack, and then I had to wait in the waiting room for the group session to start. My panic got so strong I had to leave. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to go to the support group, so I left. Once I decided that I wasn't going to do the group therapy, it was just too involved. I had to go inside large buildings in order to get well. By that time, I was frustrated. I didn't know what the heck to do. I became depressed, I cried, and maybe I just wasn't trying hard enough. I wasn't working up to it gradually. But I didn't know that then. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was lost. I couldn't even get to anybody that I was happy with. And I didn't have the money to go to a regular therapist outside of my health insurance company. So then my wife, who was at that time my girlfriend, started forcing me to go out. When she was making me go out, I was going out kicking and screaming. I did not want to do it. I just wanted to completely avoid going out, but she made me do it. And I would become very irritable, and I would cry. And gradually, just after being forced to go out a few times, I gradually became comfortable with it. And that was some sort of therapy in and of itself. So I was able to go out more. And I wasn't depressed about it as much. And once she stopped forcing me to go out, then I started going out on my own, and gradually became more and more comfortable with going back out with friends and going to restaurants and just getting out. Once I accomplished that, then I gradually started doing small grocery stores again. And I was able to do small grocery stores without much problem. As long as the lines weren't really, really long, I would do okay. And I also started going back to the bank. Before that, I had only used the ATM because I couldn't go inside a bank. And then I enjoyed outdoor activities. I would go on hikes, and I gradually got myself comfortable with walking further and further from my car. After all that, I was about 40% improved. I'm not sure exactly how long it took. It took a few months, maybe even up to a year, for me to get to that point. From that point on, I stopped pushing myself any further. I was comfortable enough to be able to do some of the things I wanted to do and the things I needed to do, as far as grocery shopping, going to banks and whatnot, and going out with friends, having fun. I was able to do that. And I just got comfortable and stopped pursuing any further improvement. And that's really all I did to improve. I just did those few things, just started going out more gradually. At that point, I was still limited on a lot of things, but it was to the point where I could live my daily life without much interference with anxiety and panic attacks. And so at that point, I was comfortable enough that was it. That was the end of any trying to improve any further. It was just comfy for me. I could travel further from home, from my car, and of course I could do fun things too. You know, go out, go to a movie, go out with friends, go out to a bar, and enjoy my hobbies. I got lazy and just didn't push any further to improve 100%. Of course, I was still limited though. I couldn't go into big stores, hospitals, airports most of the time, or shopping malls. Couldn't do big buildings. Not unless I was very close to the exit. But those places I really didn't need to go to on a daily basis. So at that point, I put my anxiety on the back burner. And I started, shifting my attention away from the anxiety and just went about life like most other people do, thinking about money and getting ahead in life and just typical goals I was then pursuing. And now I was comfortable going long distances I'd already tested it out by taking a road trip to Seattle, and I did just fine. And then another time within that time period, I drove out to see my folks in New Mexico, and I did just fine there too. So I thought, you know, it'd be nice to take a road trip across the country to see my grandparents who lived in Florida. And my fiance went with me on this road trip, and then we drove on to Phoenix. In Phoenix, we spent a few days visiting my best friend, and I did just fine. And then we left Phoenix to stop in San Antonio that night, and then spend the next day in San Antonio. And then from there, we were going to go to New Orleans and spend a couple days, and then from there, we were going to drive on to Florida to see my grandparents, and then we were going to drive back. However, when we left Phoenix and we hit the highway and we were heading towards Tucson, I did feel a bit of anxiety. I'd never been that far on a road trip before, so I'd not been that far away from home in my car, and I felt a little anxiety. We got through Tucson and my anxiety subsided, and then we got to the New Mexico border, and I started feeling kind of depressed because the desert in southern New Mexico along I-10 is not exactly the most pleasing to the eye. Then we crossed over into Texas, into West Texas. We stopped in El Paso and had a bite to eat, and I was doing fine by then. So as you can see, it kind of came and went. And then we left El Paso and stopped in this one little town to get gas, and then I felt a little funny. I had doubts and apprehension about going any further, but I thought it would pass. I thought I could handle it. You know, I had handled anxiety and panic in the past. Why couldn't I handle it this time? And we plugged along, driving along I-10, further and further and further. It was starting to get dark by that time. Sun was going down. Now we were many, many miles between towns. And then all of a sudden, I had a panic attack. Sudden, severe, but quick. The panic attack quickly subsided, but it spooked me. Spooked me so bad that I started thinking we were going to have to turn around. We got another 100 miles or so, and now it was dark, and I had another panic attack. This one was a little longer, followed by more intense anxiety, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to go any further. We had to turn around. My wife, fiance at the time, was driving, and I said, we have to turn around. I can't do this. Just cannot do it. And she said, no, we're going to do it. We've gotten this far, there's no reason why we'd have to turn around. We got into a huge argument over it. I was, of course, crying and really scared and shaking and just having one panic attack after another, knowing full well that this wasn't going to work out too well. And then she started crying, and she was really frustrated. She was very angry at me, which made me worse, and we pulled over in this little town. I tried calling my father. I just needed to talk to somebody who was calm. My fiance wasn't calm, and I finally got a hold of him, and he talked me out of my anxiety, and I felt a whole lot better after talking to him. She finally agreed that we would turn around, but we needed to go another 100 miles to one of our stops. Stayed in Sonora overnight, came back, and as soon as we left the next morning, back west, I felt better. Did not have any more anxiety or panic on that trip. Once we were home, I was still 40% improved, but I knew what my limits were then. So then I started to get a little bit worse. I noticed grocery stores were getting a little bit difficult again, as well as banks. This slight worsening actually happened over a period of a few months, so it wasn't like a sudden change. It was very gradual. And my father ended up moving back to the area, which turned out to be a very good thing. And I told him about the fact that grocery stores were starting to become a little difficult again. He didn't want to see me suffering from any anxiety at all, so he encouraged me to get some help and to do something about it. He is also a certified hypnotherapist, which was even more better. I had used his hypnotherapy in the past, which helped me with my previous health condition. He also encouraged me to go to the doctor to be prescribed a benzodiazepine, which is a tranquilizer. It's a fast-acting drug. It will suppress a panic attack quite well and anxiety. But he also wanted me to start taking a little bit of it so that I would be able to relax enough to undergo the hypnosis. And the hypnosis was going to be used to help me recover from the anxiety. I finally went to my doctor. I didn't have much problem actually going to the doctor, being inside that building, because I was by and large improved from where I was before, even though I was now slightly worse, but I was still good enough to go in there. So the doctor prescribed Ativan for me to use on an as-needed basis only, not to be taken regularly. And then my doctor also hooked me up with a psychologist. I made my first appointment with the psychologist, just told her about my history, and then the next appointment she recommended a book to help overcome the anxiety and panic. I saw her a few times, but for some reason it just didn't quite feel right, so I stopped going. After that, I read through the book, learned quite a bit about my condition in different ways to improve myself. So even though I was reading through the book, I got lazy again and didn't really seriously undertake a program to get well. I just didn't really do anything about it. I just continued to live the way I was living, which was fine. My life wasn't impeded too much. The only problems I was having on a day-to-day basis was, going to the grocery stores and going to the bank was a little tough. I dreaded it, but I got through it okay. And I was still able to go out with my friends and do the things I enjoy to do, so I was focused on other things at that time. I was focused on investing money and getting ahead and saving money for retirement. I just didn't do anything else to improve for a while. And then my work situation got a little bit more stressful. I found out that the owners of the hotel were going to be selling, and that was really scary to me. And it's kind of funny because when the new owners took over, it was extremely stressful. However, I didn't notice any change in my anxiety condition, either for better or worse. It stayed the same, remarkably, under that incredible stress of having to train the new owners. Right about at that same time, my fiance and I got married. I was a little nervous as the wedding was coming up. I had my Ativan, so I knew I'd be okay through the ceremony. The ceremony was the one part I was worried about. It was just a small backyard wedding with only 50 people. I was quite nervous beforehand, so I took an Ativan and made it through the short ceremony just fine. Sometimes my anticipatory anxiety ends up being worse than the anxiety itself once I'm out doing whatever I was anxious about doing. The next few months after that, then I actually started getting slightly worse with the grocery stores and the banks, but I first noticed it with banks. I noticed that I had problems standing in lines again, even short lines at the bank, and even standing in front of the teller. The fact that I had to stand there through the whole transaction made me feel trapped. And what added to the anxiety more was a fear of being embarrassed if I did have to walk away. I would worry about what other people would think. And then I started noticing that with grocery stores, I progressively got worse, and I began to avoid grocery stores and banks altogether. Because the last time I was in a grocery store, I was so anxious, I was very close to a panic attack, but it was so distressing that I stopped going to banks and grocery stores. A few months ago, it got dramatically worse. I also started noticing that I had anxiety about being across town. Just, again, a very mild anxiety. Just enough to notice, but I just kind of blew it off. One night after work, I went to Taco Bell, went through the drive-thru. There was There were cars in front of me, there was a car behind me, and I noticed I started feeling panicky about being in that drive-through. I felt kind of trapped, and this was the first time since my anxiety first became a problem 8 years ago that I had any anxiety in a drive-through. I had anxiety in that drive-through, but it never developed into a panic attack. Not long after that, I went through the drive-through again, and same situation. There was a car in front of me, car behind me, and this time I did have a panic attack. And it was quite distressing. And I began to wonder why the heck this was happening. You know, I'd been doing fairly good for, you know, a few years, and now all of a sudden I can't do drive-thrus. What's that? Another day, not too long after that, my wife and a friend and I went to this downtown festival that they have every week. And I'd been to this festival the week before, didn't have any problem. We walked through the crowd to the far end of the festival from where we were parked, and as we approached the far end, I started feeling a lot of anxiety. And I had a mild panic attack when we got to the end, because I was uncomfortable knowing that we'd have to walk back through the crowd to get back to the car. And I also had picked up this friend of ours that was with us who lived on the opposite side of town, so it's not like I could just leave and go home whenever I wanted to. We'd still have to drop him off and then drive all the way back across town. And I had a panic attack just being out, being around a lot of people, and knowing that there was no easy way home. And this was the first time that I had had any anxiety about being out in years. So this raised some questions in my mind. So I told my wife I wasn't feeling well, and we started walking back the other way towards the beginning of the festival, to closer to where I was parked. And then they wanted to go get some ice cream on the way back. We had to walk kind of back away from the car again, through the crowd, in another direction, away from the car, to get to where this little shop was where they were selling ice cream. When we got there, I really had a major panic attack. This one was severe and lasted, seemed like an eternity. I just wanted to run away. I wanted to run around the other side of the buildings where there weren't as many people, to get back to my car. I mean, I just had the incredible urge to run. And when my wife and our friend came out of the little ice cream place, I told them, we got to start heading back towards the car. I really don't feel well. As we walked back closer to the car again, I started to feel better, but I had a lot of anxiety. Panic was gone, but the anxiety was still there. So we found some chairs to sit in fairly close to where the car was parked, and we just decided to stop and just do some people watching and just watch the world go by. And we sat there for about an hour, and I gradually calmed down. And I also wasn't sure why all of a sudden I was having panic attacks again after all these years in situations that for a long time didn't bring any anxiety. But this time it seemed a little stronger and a little worse. Really didn't know why. I didn't know when it was going to go away, how long it was going to be like that, and I started having anxiety about whether it was going to go away once I got home. After we were done at the festival, I felt better by then, and you know, we drove our friend home and came back home, and I was fine actually the rest of the evening. However, the next day I realized again that things really weren't fine. I just realized my anxiety had just worsened. My condition had worsened considerably, almost overnight. It started getting very difficult driving to and from work. The distance from home. I also noticed I was having panic attacks every time I'd come up to a red light. And it was even worse if there were cars in front of me, behind me, and to my sides, to where I couldn't go anywhere. If I felt trapped, if I was trapped for any length of time in traffic, I would panic. And that got to be so distressing that I had to start driving to work in the right lane, and I would still experience incredible anxiety going to work. At this point I was still okay at work, but had problems going to and from work. And just driving in general became very difficult, going anywhere. Even if it was down the street, it became a monumental task, just doing that, being in any distance from home. And I started panicking being away from home because I knew I'd have to drive back the other way in order to get home, and I couldn't just arrive home instantaneously. Then of course I developed anticipatory anxiety about going to work, and that was pretty bad. Sometimes the anticipatory anxiety would keep me up at night, the night before I'd work. And then of course I'd have anticipatory anxiety the morning I'd leave for work, and then I noticed I couldn't even ride in cars. I couldn't be a passenger in my wife's car and go anywhere without feeling a lot of anxiety and panic. But I decided to give it a try one day. You know, we were going to go to a restaurant fairly close to home and meet a friend there, and my wife drove, and I felt a lot of anxiety going down the street to this place, and we sat outside where I thought I'd feel a little bit better, and I just kept getting these fleeting mild panic attacks. I had the urge to leave, get in the car and maybe pop an Ativan or something. I just wasn't comfortable being out anymore. But there was one thing I could still do, and I'm very thankful for that. Very close to our apartment complex there is a trail, a bike trail where people bike and jog along a river, and it's 1.2 miles long, and I've always been able to ride my bike up and down that path. So I didn't have any problems with that. I didn't have any problems walking a very short distance out of the apartment. If it was any further than a 2-minute walk, then I'd start experiencing anxiety. I realized that my anxiety was trying to paint me into a corner. It was limiting my life severely now. I started even having panic attacks at work, and then eventually it got so bad I had to quit work. I had to take a leave of absence. And I'm also noticing sometimes that being home too much, I'll experience anxiety just being home day after day. So it's kind of a contradictory situation where I have anxiety when I go out, but I also have anxiety if I stay in. As soon as my anxiety took a turn for the worst, I did start trying to do something about it. I took on a very aggressive and serious plan of action to recover from this anxiety. I had to do something about it right away. I didn't want to wait. So this program that I'm undertaking is a comprehensive approach to overcoming anxiety and panic. And I had to really get serious about it this time. And so I made a serious commitment of time and money to do this. It's so easy to get caught up in your anxiety and fear of doing anything, but you have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit in order to begin to grapple your condition and hopefully overcome it. And at this point in time, my approach is to do it without medication, long-term medication. I still have a benzodiazepine, a tranquilizer that I can take every so often in extreme situations as needed, but not regularly. And that's what I've done. I haven't taken that much since I was prescribed it, but I have taken it just a few times where I had to go to the doctor or to get to my first therapist appointment. The very first thing I started doing was reading through my anxiety workbook. It really helped me a lot. It also helped to give me motivation to do it. You know, the workbook it's awesome. It's called the Anxiety and Phobia Workbook, and the author is Edmund Bourne. The book is basically a comprehensive and holistic approach to overcoming anxiety and panic. So it involves things you can do for your body and things you can do for your mind. And it's broken down into sections. Nutrition, mineral deficiencies that can lead to anxiety problems or make your existing anxiety problems worse. Physical exercise, mistaken beliefs, which involve self-talk, positive, your thoughts, positive, negative thoughts that can influence your anxiety condition. Sleep, daily relaxation, visualization, exposure therapy. I mean, the list goes on. The book made me realize that the resources are there for overcoming anxiety. You know, and before I started reading this book, I had no idea that there were so many resources at my fingertips that I could use to overcome my anxiety and panic. Now that I've read the book and I've been presented with the different avenues to do it, and some of them don't even cost anything if money's a concern for you in overcoming your anxiety and panic, which it kind of is for me, because obviously now I've been off work for a while. But there's just so many resources available to you that you probably don't even realize. Like me, I had no idea that a lot of them existed. I didn't realize that some of the simplest things can go a long way in calming your anxiety and making living day to day that much easier. It can be a little overwhelming when you're presented with all those options. It's like there's all these things, and it makes you wonder, well, how can I squeeze all that into one day? But you don't. You just do a little bit of each thing every day. Eventually it becomes automatic. You don't even think about it anymore, and your unconscious mind learns how to cope with panic attacks and how to respond to anxiety-provoking situations. And hopefully the response becomes less anxiety and less panic attacks in intensity and frequency. So once I read the book and now I had all these resources at my fingertips, I started a regimen of daily 30-minute aerobic exercise, no matter how I felt. And that's really important, because if you only go out and exercise on days where you feel good, then it kind of becomes an excuse for not getting out and exercising. Of course, you could exercise inside too. You don't necessarily have to go out if you're absolutely housebound. 30 minutes, I would say, would be the minimum. At least for me, it's the minimum. You know, and it's got to be the aerobic exercise. You got to get the heart pumping and your breathing rate up. And I'll tell you, exercising not only will help with your anxiety, but it helps in many other ways too. It affects how you feel. And I think the way it helps with anxiety is it does it a lot of ways indirectly through other physiological changes in your body and then ultimately your mind. But one thing it does is, if you are feeling anxious, if you've got that adrenaline going through you, then by getting out and exercising, you're burning up that adrenaline. And in that way, it does directly affect your anxiety. But one thing I noticed that it does is that if I exercise early in the day, if I make that one of the first things I do, then it gives me more energy. And that's a really good thing, because part of the problem with anxiety is it saps you of your energy. And when you're sapped of your energy, you lose your drive. You lose your motivation. And if you're lacking motivation, then that will definitely get in the way of you getting better. And so I find that by doing this exercise first thing, then it gives me the energy I need to get through my day, and that extra energy gives a boost to my motivation, which is all the better for me. Another thing it does with that energy boost is it makes you more alert. And that's really important when you're out and about doing your exposure therapy. And I'll explain, if you don't know what exposure therapy is, I'll be explaining that a little bit later on. But when you're out and about and you feel more alert, for me, I'm less likely to have a panic attack. If I'm feeling groggy and weird, then I'm more likely to have a panic attack, because part of what will lead me to a panic attack is a fear of passing out, or a fear of my mind sort of losing control in a way, because when I don't feel alert, I don't feel as in control of my mind, and so that can lead to a panic attack for me, especially if I'm outside of my comfort zone. So the exercise will help with that for sure. And then another benefit I noticed from the exercise is that I tend to sleep a little bit better at night, which is yet another thing that will affect your anxiety. And your anxiety can affect it too, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. So overall, the exercise just makes you feel a whole lot better. So since I wanted to try and combat this anxiety and panic problem using natural avenues, I tried taking St. John's wort for 4 weeks, but unfortunately I felt no significant benefit. See, St. John's wort supposedly acts a lot like an SSRI antidepressant. They say that it takes about 4 weeks before you notice any benefit from the St. John's wort. It takes a while to start working. I tried it for that time, and unfortunately it just didn't seem to do a whole lot for me. But of course, everyone's different. I might have not been the right candidate for St. John's wort. And the other thing too is St. John's wort is not regulated as medications are, so maybe I just wasn't trying the right brand, but nonetheless, I did also experience some side effects from taking the St. John's wort, and again, everybody's different, so just because I had these side effects doesn't necessarily mean that you will too. But I had a few of the side effects that the SSRIs are known to have. One of them is headaches. I did have headaches while taking St. John's wort. I also felt a little bit dizzy at times, and had the sexual side effects too with that. And I was a little surprised by that one because from the reading that I've done, there doesn't seem to be much mention about sexual side effects. I also didn't notice any effect on my mood, or didn't notice any cognitive effects either. Didn't notice any confusion. I think that's one thing that was implicated with the use of St. John's wort as a possible side effect would be possible confusion or mental fuzziness, but I didn't feel any of that. I didn't feel any cognitive effects from it. And then once the 4 weeks was passed, it might have even been 6 weeks that I took it, I'm not sure, but when I really didn't notice any significant benefits from it, I stopped taking it. And I couldn't find much information on the internet about withdrawing from St. John's wort. I had done a lot of research on SSRIs, so from what I've read, I heard that, it can help a lot of people. So I heard probably just as many good things about the SSRIs as I heard bad things about. Maybe a little bit more on the side of good things, but still, the number of reports of SSRIs causing more harm than good were still big enough to concern me. So I was really torn about whether to try an SSRI or not. I just couldn't make up my mind. I'd read stories that people enjoyed a huge increase in quality of life. I'd also read about all the side effects and discontinuation of them, the problems with that, and how people felt while taking them, that they felt numb. Couldn't really feel as far as happy or sad or really any emotion. Just kind of like a robot. And that scared me. I didn't want to live like a zombie. I mean, yeah, I wanted to get rid of my anxiety and panic attacks, but I also didn't want to sacrifice living and feeling like a normal person either. But there are those that respond well to it too. That once they can ride out the initial side effects, that they don't feel like a zombie. That they can lead a normal life while taking an SSRI. I don't know. I just couldn't make up my mind about what I wanted to do, but at the same time I was desperate to do something. So then I thought I would give it a fair shot. When I realized the St. John's wort wasn't helping, I went to the doctor and he prescribed Zoloft. I have to be honest, the list of warnings and side effects really spooked me. I was apprehensive about taking it from the start, but decided to give it a try after I found St. John's wort not helpful in my case. So I put my worries about the side effects aside and thought this could really help me. I came home from the doctor with the Zoloft, and he had prescribed 25 milligram tablets, but had me starting off at just half of that, which would have been 12.5 milligrams. The idea of starting off with such a low dose is to minimize the side effects. Now in my case, even though he had me starting off with half a pill at 12.5 milligrams, I thought I'd take it a step further, just to be on the safe side, and even cut it into quarters. So, the first day, I took a quarter tablet, and that would have been 6.25 milligrams of Zoloft. About an hour later, I felt a slight change in my cognition. I felt slightly spacey, and I had a little anxiety about feeling spacey, but I kind of just went on with my day. And then a few hours later, I had a little bit of a headache, and I also started feeling a little dizzy, and I think I slept okay that night. Then the next morning, I felt normal, or what normal had been for me around that time. And then that afternoon, this time I took half of a pill, 12.5 milligrams, and it seemed like with a half hour later, I started feeling jittery. I guess kind of like the jittery you feel when you haven't eaten. You just feel kind of shaky, but without the anxiety. As time went on, the jitteriness increased, and I noticed a bigger effect on my cognition this time. This time I felt even more spacey. I couldn't concentrate very well on things. I tried going for a bike ride, feeling like that just to see what would happen, and I'd almost forget blocks of time, like I'd be riding along that little biking trail and I'd get to a certain point and go, wow, I got here quick. I didn't actually forget what had happened, but I spaced out quite a bit throughout that bike ride, and it kind of came in waves, and it was a little bit uncomfortable of a feeling, and not being able to really concentrate or keep a train of thought going. When I came back in, I actually had I had a mild panic attack based on feeling like that. It was a weird feeling that was uncomfortable enough for me that it caused a mild panic attack. And I had more of a headache, and I felt a little bit dizzier. At that point, I decided that, yeah, I could wait a week or two for the side effects to wear off, but there was no guarantee that the spaciness would go away, so I just thought I'd stop taking it from there. I had had enough of the Zoloft at that point. And I emailed my doctor, let him know what was going on. I let the St. John's wort wash out of my system for the most part before I started the Zoloft, because you're not supposed to take the two at the same time, or when each of them is in your system. The next morning, after having taken the Zoloft, I did not feel good at all. I felt so washed, I felt so dizzy and lightheaded that it was difficult for me to get around the apartment. I mean, it was a scary feeling, just walking from one end of the apartment to the next. And my dad came to see me that day, and we visited, and I felt so out of it. My mind just felt so out of it. And I had to be careful standing up not to pass out, because I did feel like I was on the verge of passing out. Tried to go for a walk, but I couldn't handle it very well. We got maybe a minute from the apartment, and I just felt so weird and a little panicky because of how I was feeling. And that was the end of the Zoloft. Another thing I started doing at the onset of my worsening, my recent worsening, is hypnosis. My father is a certified hypnotherapist, and he just happened to move back to the area that I live in before this happened, which was a godsend. So 2 times a month I would get together with my father and we would do a hypnosis session to help reduce my anxiety and frequency of panic attacks. And let me tell you, after a hypnosis session, just feel so refreshed, so much better. And the feeling will usually last the rest of the day. especially a long hypnosis session. And especially if the hypnotherapist spends a lot of time relaxing you in the beginning. But you have to be able to go under. If you're real anxious, it's hard to go under. You have to be able to relax considerably. Can't have that adrenaline going through your body. So he would spend a long time with the relaxation and then leading into the trance state. And so I think that has helped me a little bit, because it teaches your unconscious mind to think differently, to not respond with anxiety and panic in situations that normally do. And then my dad also gave me a self-hypnosis CD. He lives in the general area, but it's quite a long drive, so I can't really afford to be driving to see him all the time. And same thing for him. He can't, afford to be driving over here all the time. So he gave me this self-hypnosis CD to use regularly and frequently. And it's rather short. It's about 20 or 30 minutes long. And I do this every single day. Most of the time I do it at night because it helps me kind of unwind and get sleepy, so that when I go to bed I'll be able to fall asleep quick and hopefully stay there. And I think that's helped. The biggest thing I've been doing is exposure therapy. That is, putting myself in situations that induce anxiety and panic attacks. And that is really important. That is a cornerstone to getting well. But you might be wondering why, if it works so well, why don't more people do it? Well, the answer to that is it's not easy to do. It's not easy to get started, and it's not easy to endure the anxiety that you'll feel during the exposure therapy. But it's absolutely necessary to feel some anxiety while doing your exposure therapy in order to learn how to desensitize from it. And so, for those of you who don't know what exposure therapy is, it simply means going out and doing the exact things that bring on anxiety and panic. But remember, you don't have to do it all at once. You can actually start. The best way to do it is to start in small steps. Gradually work up to it. It's best to go into it as calm as you can, and then gradually push yourself a little further, and when you start feeling that anxiety, keep going with it and stay in that situation as long as you can, because the longer you can stay with it, the more you'll teach your mind that it's okay. You're going to be okay. So what if you have anxiety? That's all it is. It's just feelings. You can get through it. They might be uncomfortable, but you can get through it. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm learning. I'm learning how important it is to do that. Because when you're done with your exposure therapy session, you will feel so good. You'll feel so proud of yourself for getting yourself out there in those same situations that you were avoiding for so long. It's not exactly pleasant, but the rewards are huge. The reward at the end of the tunnel is huge. Try not to let your anxiety put you off. Try not to procrastinate in doing it. If you do find yourself procrastinating, you got to stop and ask yourself why. Why am I procrastinating? Fortunately for me, I didn't have any problems getting started. I wanted to. I wanted to do it, even though I knew there was a good chance I'd have a panic attack. But you also have to be willing to take risks, because you just might have a panic attack while you're out doing your exposure therapy. I read through the section of my book that talked about coping with panic attacks, and it's so much easier said than done. It takes practice, and just now I'm starting to learn how to cope with panic attacks. But let me talk to you about how I've used the exposure therapy. See, my problem is driving places, being far from home, and then staying at a place away from home is another problem. So like working, for example. You know, I would have problems going to work, and then I would have problems being at work, and then I would have problems driving home from work. The driving, the being away from home, getting stopped at traffic lights, getting stuck in traffic was just monumental. Going to the grocery store, really doing anything outside of home. So the first thing I needed to overcome was the driving. Because if I mastered being in a grocery store but didn't master the driving part, then I wouldn't be able to even start. So the very first thing I worked on was not panicking at a red light or when I'm boxed in traffic at a red light. I gradually overcame that part of it, and here's how I did it. I would get in the car, I would drive out onto the street, and I would start off in the right lane, because by starting off in the right lane, there's still an out. I can still maneuver to the right if there was a right turn lane next to me to get out if my panic got too intense. So, I approached the first stoplight in the right lane, and I let myself experience being stopped at the red light in the right lane with no cars in front of me. I approached panic attack, and then I did that a few times. I did that same scenario a few times until I didn't panic in that situation anymore or even feel any anxiety. Okay, so I took it a step further. Then the next few times I would stay in the right lane again, but this time I would allow there to be cars in front of me. And I felt a little anxiety but no panic. And then I did that a few times. Now I was ready to really trapping myself. So, the next time I would stay in the right lane again, but I would make sure I got stopped at a light where there was no turn lane to the right of me. It was just a curb. And I wanted there to be cars in front of me and cars beside me and cars behind me. But I was still sticking to the right lane because I knew if I panicked I can just put the car in park, put my emergency flashers on, and just work out of that panic attack. And I did have a panic attack, but I didn't end up having to use that extreme measure. And then I did that scenario a few times until I didn't panic or have any anxiety in that aspect of it. Then I graduated to the left lane, where there were no cars in front of me, but there were cars on both sides of me. So in essence, I still was trapped. I guess if I absolutely panicked and I had to get away, then I could run the red light, and hope there were no cops around. But never came to that, of course. I had a little anxiety but no panic attack in that situation, but I kept doing that a few times. Then I took it yet a step further. This was the ultimate part of the traffic lights, the most difficult part. And I'm finally able to do it. And I just recently accomplished this. I would be in the left lane or a left turn lane with an island. And I would make sure that there were cars on all sides of me where I truly couldn't go anywhere even if I wanted to. And I started off doing that because I got to know the cycle of lights. I got to realize, okay, first the left turns go, then the oncoming goes, then the left turn from this direction goes, and then the cross traffic goes, and then it'll be our turn to go. So I started off by timing it in such a way that I would truly trap myself in these situations when the light wouldn't be too far off from changing to green, and I would soon be able to go. And I had a lot of anxiety. I did have a panic attack a couple times doing that, but I kept doing it over and over until it wasn't a problem anymore. Then I started totally trapping myself in that situation, in that same situation, but right when the light would turn red, and I'd have to wait through a complete cycle of lights before it would turn green. And I had a little anxiety but no panic, and just did that over and over until that was no longer a problem. So I'm proud to say that getting stuck at lights is no longer a problem. However, what still is a problem for me is driving distances from home. That is still a problem that I'm currently working on. And I'm currently working on being able to drive further and further from home. I can drive a mile from home with absolutely no anxiety whatsoever. I can drive 2 miles with minimal anxiety, and then I can drive 3 miles from home with moderate to pretty bad anxiety but no panic. If you were to plot your progress on a chart, you would notice that it is not a straight line. That as you're doing your exposure therapy, it's more like a jagged kind of line. Kind of like the stock market. You know, you're going to have dips, you're going to have peaks, but overall you're going to get better. Overall. You know, you might find one week you're doing really, really good with your exposure therapy, you're able to get further and further from home, but then the next week you might not even be able to do half of what you were able to do the previous week, and so forth. But I don't find, for me, it's not week by week that way. For maybe 5 days in a row, I'll get better and better and better. I'll be able to progress further and further. And then maybe a couple days following that, I won't be able to do as much. And I have noticed that. You know, at one point I was able to even drive 10 miles from home up to the next town and come back with hardly any anxiety, unbelievably. You know, in the last few days here, I have barely been able to drive 3 miles. I mean, I've done it with a ton of anxiety. Fortunately, no panic attack, but, you know, that's kind of how it works. But overall, I think I'm getting a handle on it. It feels like I am progressing. Another thing I'm learning is to modify my self-talk. And that's a really important thing to try to do on a daily basis, is to change your beliefs and to change the way you talk to yourself in your mind, your thoughts. That's an especially important skill to use with exposure therapy, because what makes exposure therapy so successful is learning, teaching your mind that it's not dangerous, that you can do it, and you can overcome it. And with repetition, it becomes easier and easier to do. And part of that is to change the way you talk to yourself about it. You know, if you go into it telling yourself that you'll be okay, I'll do just fine, I'll make it. Sure, I might have some anxiety, but I'm learning how to cope. I'm learning how to cope with the panic attacks. And I think I will be just fine. And if you use that before and during your exposure therapy, it'll not only make the experience easier, but it'll also make it more likely for it to work. And from what I've read, exposure therapy actually is the most effective thing you can do for overcoming your anxiety, by just facing it head on. But obviously don't overwhelm yourself. Don't try to do too much at once. Take it gradually. And so with the self-talk, you know, you have to learn to think positively. And that includes the internal chatter. Most people aren't aware that they have this internal chatter in the mind. These things that you tell yourself every day, almost every minute of the day. And these can be things like telling yourself that you feel like crap today, or you're feeling great today, or it can be anything. And a lot of what you tell yourself is based on your beliefs about reality. You know, if you believe that these situations that you've been avoiding for so long are dangerous, then that's going to get in the way of you getting better. You have to start believing that you will be okay, that you will make it through your condition, and that you will make it through your therapies, and that you will ultimately be okay. You know, it may be difficult. You're going to feel some anxiety and some pain, but then you have to learn to tell yourself that you'll be able to cope with it. and that the more you learn how to cope with it, the less of those negative things you'll feel. But you have to start with your beliefs. You have to start believing that anxiety is transient, panic attacks are self-limiting, and that they aren't going to go on forever. That normally within a few minutes your panic attack will subside. And there's just a whole bunch of core beliefs that you have to start questioning, thinking about, and then changing. You have to change the way you think about things. Just driving to the grocery store on any given day, you experience a ton of anxiety, and then you take someone who doesn't have any anxiety and they get to the grocery store just fine. It's the same situation. The only difference between the two people is the way their mind handles it. So that's something that I'm learning right now, is the self-talk part of it. And it's not easy. It's a habit. It's a habit that needs to be changed, and habits are not easy to break. So I'm trying to break all the negative self-talk, and I'm trying to replace it with positive self-talk, affirmations, and I'm trying to change my beliefs about reality and about this anxiety disorder. And I'm finding that it really does help with during the exposure therapy. But one problem I do have with the exposure therapy is the anticipatory anxiety is really, really strong. And that is very tough for me. I'm still struggling with that part of it. Another thing that I find really helpful, and this is not until very recently that I'm learning to do this, is while I'm out doing my exposure therapy and I'm in the situations that bring on anxiety and I start feeling like I'm heading for a panic attack, I just concentrate on relaxing my whole body. And I find that helps tremendously. The last couple times I tried it, it seemed to arrest any potential panic attack that would have occurred. But you also have to realize that fighting your feelings will only make it worse. Or resist. Because the more you fight and resist, the worse it will be. But by relaxing my body, you have to tell yourself, okay, I'm going to flow with this. If this is what's going to happen, I'm going to flow with it. You have to learn to flow with it and just use abdominal breathing, which I'm not good at yet. So I haven't mastered that, but I understand that it works. It takes practice, and that's something that I'm doing, but it will work. And also just relaxing your body. Just focus on all the tension leaving your body. And again, that's something just in the last couple days that I'm practicing. And so the thing about exposure therapy is that if you keep avoiding situations that bring on anxiety and panic, the more your unconscious mind is going to learn that those places aren't safe anymore. So you'll only perpetuate your anxiety disorder by avoiding. So eventually you're going to want to face it anyway. I would say even if you are taking medications, it's not a bad idea to use all these other therapies that are available to really help you get well, because my belief is that sometimes medicines only cover up the problem. They alleviate the symptoms, so that's why I'm doing all these other things. And again, the exposure therapy really seems to be helping me the most, and I know it will help you too. But it takes time, commitment, motivation, and of course money to put in your gas tank. But it is all well worth it, and you feel so good after doing it. And getting proper sleep is important too. That's something that I have particular difficulty with, only because by nature I'm an insomniac. What can cause an anxiety and panic disorder can also cause insomnia. A serotonin deficiency is often implicated in anxiety and panic disorders and also insomnia. So if you have a serotonin deficiency, then getting the proper sleep is not as easy as it sounds. If at all possible, do try to get the right sleep, and you'll find that will help you tremendously as well. Because I've noticed that on nights where I haven't slept at all or didn't sleep very well, the next day my anxiety would sometimes be 10 times worse. And I take melatonin. It's a natural supplement you can get at any store. It will help regulate your sleep patterns. Helps you fall asleep quick. And see, melatonin is formed by serotonin. So you can kind of see the connection between anxiety and sleep problems. If you're lacking the serotonin, then you'll also ultimately be lacking the melatonin to help you fall asleep. So a natural aid such as that might be helpful, but of course ask your doctor before taking melatonin. A couple hours before it's time to go to bed, just if you have dimmer switches on your lights in your home, turn them down. Because if you surround yourself with a dimmer environment, your body will naturally produce more melatonin. That's why we get sleepy at night. You can also listen to a relaxing CD before you go to bed if you find that you have trouble falling asleep. But a common problem is anxiety keeping you from sleeping. And that's where the relaxation tape comes in handy. Sometimes I do my self-hypnosis before bed, and boy, that really does help. Because it's the racing thoughts, too, that can keep you awake. And those are not easy to get rid of. Another tactic that sometimes works, doesn't always work, but sometimes works, is when I go to bed, I focus on nothingness. And this is a type of meditation where the goal is to get rid of any thoughts in your mind, any thoughts about anything. Just focus on nothingness. Or you could take a hot shower before you go to bed. What that does is that raises your body temperature, and then when you exit the shower and you go to bed, then when your body starts cooling down again, it'll actually help induce sleepiness. So those are the few tricks that I've used to help myself fall asleep. I also tried 5-HTP. Came across that one on the internet. It's hydroxyltryptophan. And what that does is tryptophan converts into serotonin, which is what is needed to regulate mood, and of course affects your anxiety level and panic attacks. And then from there it metabolizes into melatonin, which helps with the sleep part of it. From what I've read online about 5-HTP is that it works right away, or at least it works quicker than the antidepressants do. And some people have had wonderful benefits from taking 5-HTP. And you definitely can't use 5-HTP at the same time as using an SSRI or any other antidepressant without asking your doctor first. I tried it for a week, and you know what? I really didn't notice any difference at all in my sleep patterns or in my anxiety or panic attacks. I just didn't notice anything different when I took it. And it could be that I just happen to be taking a variation that doesn't work as well as, say, another brand. I haven't tried any other brands. I've only tried that one brand, and I only took it for a week. So I stopped taking it just to see if I noticed any other change if I stopped taking it. And I didn't really notice any difference there either. And then one of the more recent things that I'm doing for my anxiety is I am seeing a therapist. A psychotherapist who employs CBT, which stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. And a lot of people really swear by CBT. It's believed that it's one of the most effective therapies. So I found a therapist in my area that does CBT. And I went and saw her for the first time last week. In one of my next videos, I'm going to document my trip to and from that therapist. You know, it's kind of like having a personal trainer at the gym. She's going to work with me, give me assignments. She's already, happy with everything I'm doing thus far to get well. And I'm just trying to eat right. I'm avoiding certain things. I'm avoiding stimulants such as refined sugars, coffee, caffeinated coffee that is, and nicotine is a problem too. I don't smoke, but if you are a smoker, that's, hey, another reason to quit smoking. They're all stimulants, which, as you know, will aggravate your anxiety condition. So if you cut those out of your diet, that's one step in the right direction. eating right. That's another habit that's very difficult to change, and it's hard for them. So diet goes a long way by taking care of your body, eating the right foods, taking supplements if you need to, will definitely help you. Another very important thing with anxiety and panic conditions is to include relaxation every single day. If you do that every single day, you'll notice your panic attacks will become less frequent and less intense. You're teaching your body how to relax. Today is my first therapist appointment. It's the first time in nearly a month that I've gone anywhere to stay more than a few minutes. I'm extremely nervous. I've got so much anxiety, I'm doubtful that I'll be able to make my appointment. So I take an Ativan and hope it kicks in soon. I keep thinking that I'll end up calling the psychologist to cancel at the last minute. I just don't know if I can do it. I didn't get any sleep. But I'm willing to try my very hardest because I really need to see this psychologist to help me get well enough to be able to work again. I honestly don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm having anxiety attacks and I feel very sleepy and dizzy. I'm going to go for a 30-minute bike ride to help me feel better. Alright, here I go. My first appointment. I'm trying hard as heck to do this. Hope I can. Well, so far I'm hitting every red light. I'm maybe a half mile from home, hanging in there. Well, I got stopped at another light, and I am now about a mile from home. And I've got a moderate amount of anxiety. Well, maybe a lot of anxiety. Fortunately, I haven't had a panic attack yet. I'm just trying to hang in there. I really want to make it to my appointment, and I'm running a little bit late here, so I'm sure she'll understand. Well, I had a window of time just now. Just a wave came over me, like a feeling that maybe I can do this, that maybe I'll get through it. But that was short-lived. My anxiety's coming back. I just had that wave for a second, like, washed over me. Like, all of a sudden, maybe I can do this. Well, I'm almost there. This psychiatrist is only, I think, 2 miles from my home, from where I live. So, I'm nearly there. Alright, well, I finally found a parking spot, and I'm not feeling too bad, just a little anxiety. I think I can do it. I think I'm going to make it. So, to any of you out there who don't think you can do it, give it a fair try. I just did give it a fair try. So far, I'm okay, and I hope my good luck kind of carries me forward. So, alrighty. Well, I will see you after my appointment, and I'll let you know how it went. Alright, I just did it. Just got out from my appointment. Everything went wonderfully. I actually survived. I didn't know if I was going to survive this or not. So I'm very pleased. So the moral of the story is, if I can do it, you can do it. I got absolutely no sleep last night. I was just anxious as hell coming over here. But hell, I did it. I did it. This is the first time I've ridden in a car in 2 months, and this ought to be interesting. I've driven but have not been a passenger in quite a while, so this will be quite interesting. I do feel a little nervous. Whoa, some anxiety. I did my exercise this morning. I took my vitamins. What else did I do today? Oh, and I did my exposure therapy, which went very well. And I drove that same 7 miles earlier and did just fine. Hopefully this little ride here will go just as fine. Now promise me if I have a panic attack and I need you to pull over that you will. Okay. How far have we gone? About 2 miles? Yeah. Okay, so we've gone about 2 miles and I'm feeling a little less nervous, so that's good. Still feel pretty good. I think this is going to go well. Well, I'm doing okay. Very happy I made it up here. We had dinner, it was delicious, and did just fine tonight. Now I get to do the ride home. Attribute my success tonight on my first trip as a passenger to all the exercise I did this morning, the exposure therapy that I did, and I did my self-hypnosis CD too this afternoon, and I think that all really helped me. The fact that I did it, you can do it too. See how easy that was? And I didn't think I could do it, and I did it. Not doing exposure therapy today. I'm just getting ready to leave. Actually, I am leaving. I'm gonna do this for about an hour. So exposure therapy involves putting yourself in situations that cause anxiety for you. And that way you can face it head on, can realize it's not dangerous, that you'll be okay, you'll make it through it. And you just gradually relearn to be comfortable in those situations again, but it's something that's done very gradually in steps. That's exactly what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a while, and I'm gonna drive my usual route and see how I do this time. And I do feel a little bit of anticipatory anxiety. Moderate amount, I would say. But I still feel like I can do it. And I'm going to. Well, here we go. Well, the anxiety is fairly strong only because I missed a day yesterday of exposure therapy because the night before that I hadn't slept any, so I still feel like I can do it. I'm sure the longer I stick with this, the easier it will become. And we're a half mile from home now. Alright, so about a mile and a half home, I feel about the same. Quite a bit of anxiety, but I'm sure I can do it. I'm sure I can. Decided to run an errand while I'm doing this anyway. And there is a fair amount of traffic out today too. Okay, well, I'm at my errand point. I'm about 2 miles from home. Still feel a lot of anxiety, but I'm flowing with it. And I will be right back. I'm back. Well, I feel a little bit better. Sometimes I find that walking around helps me feel a little better if I've got a lot of anxiety. So yeah, just if you feel your anxiety real strong when you're out doing your therapy, just stop what you're doing if you can and walk around a little bit for a couple minutes. So here's my game plan right now. See, I find that the longer I'm in my situation, the better I feel. I'm acclimating to it now. I find that the first time is often a little difficult, but second time around is a little easier. Alright, I'm starting my second time around, my second route. I'm going to do that same route, plus I'm going to try and go a little further this time. Alright, so I'm doing my second loop and I'm feeling much better now. Thank God. Just gotta keep doing it until you feel better. Then I consider my session over. Going another route this time. Did my second route without too much problem, and now I'm going to do a route in the opposite direction and see how it goes. Now that I'm more or less trapped in traffic here, I'm stopped at a red light. I got cars in front of me, cars beside me. Don't quite have any cars next to me yet, but there's an island, and I've got cars behind me too, which you can't see. So I'm essentially trapped, and I'm actually handling it pretty well. This used to bring on a panic attack for me doing this, but I've done this so many times now and gotten through it that it's okay. It doesn't bother me anymore. Much. A little bit sometimes, but not much. And I'm on my other route here. I'm about a mile in the opposite direction and still doing pretty good. Little anxiety. About 2 miles from home now, in the other direction. Not doing too bad. This traffic light we're at usually takes a very long time to cycle through to the next green. But that's okay. I can ride with whatever anxiety I might feel. Somehow I'm doing pretty good considering I started out this session with anxiety. So not bad. Not bad. Just gonna keep going until I'm tired. Well, it's been about an hour since I've been doing this, and I stuck with it long enough for the anxiety to subside considerably. And now I'm getting tired. My eyes are getting tired. It's getting a little harder to focus just because I've been doing this for a while. And when you have anxiety, it makes it saps energy from you. So you tend to poop out a little sooner if you've been feeling anxiety. Some days go really, really good. Some days go not so good. And other days are like this, where it's just average. But I'm going to keep doing it. Over and over and over. Until it's comfortable. Did my second appointment. We ended up doing a phone appointment, which is just fine. We had a productive session. We talked about how important it is to give yourself a plan when you are out and about and could potentially have a panic attack. A plan meaning what to do if you do have a panic attack. You know, something that will ease your mind in case you do end up having one. She's also having me journal. That way we can identify which things are working, which things are not helping, and which things are detrimental. And that way can look back through the journal and identify patterns, because it can become hard to remember exactly everything you did that day, ate, how well you slept. So it's important to write these things down, and then you can get a better idea for what you need to try next, and just monitor your progress with a daily journal. And we talked about self-talk. We talked about my negative self-talk, you know, the inner voice that throws us into an anxiety attack and a panic attack. And she wanted me to get in touch with it so that I could identify what it's telling me, how it's influencing my anxiety and panic. And then from there, once I get in better touch with it, then learning how to replace that negative inner voice with something more constructive towards overcoming my anxiety. Describe to her in more detail about what my negative self-talk tells me. For example, it tends to look at a situation, you know, when I'm out driving and I look down the road and I see all these traffic lights and all this traffic, my inner self-talk goes, "Oh, that's stressful. You don't want to go down there. You don't want to drive down that far. You'll have an anxiety attack." And so I'm able to identify now what my inner self-talk is telling me. And now I'm learning to replace that inner self-talk with something constructive and positive. Things such as, "Oh, you'll be just fine." Or, "So what if you have a panic attack? So what? You know, what's the worst that could happen? You just pull over. Yeah, it's unpleasant, but I make it through." I'm learning to replace the what if thinking with so what kind of thinking. So what if it's an anxiety-ridden day? So what if I have a panic attack? I can handle it. I can deal with it. I'm learning skills to deal with it. It's slow, but it's happening. I'm also learning how to cope with severe anxiety and panic attacks now. The key is to remove the fear of having panic attacks, because it's that secondary fear, I think, that is the most debilitating. Because if you're afraid of having a panic attack, you won't go out at all. You won't attempt anything that brings anxiety. I'm learning to give myself an out when I'm out and about. If I have a panic attack, I have a plan of action now. What to do if I have a panic attack, and that is to pull over if I'm out driving, recline the seat, just lay back, close my eyes, take some deep breaths, and totally relax my body. Or maybe even get out of the car and walk around a little bit to burn up some of that adrenaline. Because I do notice when I get out and walk around that sometimes that helps. And sometimes staring off to one side, staring at a distant object, helps too, because you're distracting your mind. So I'm learning little tricks like that to cope. And one thing that has really helped when I feel a panic attack coming on is to totally and completely relax my body. Just focus on releasing the tension rather than tensing up in response to it, because fighting your anxiety that way will only make it worse. If you try to fight it, it will make it worse. If you try to fight it or suppress it. So I'm learning to go with it. You have to actually flow and go with your anxiety and panic attack. But by flowing with it, it does actually limit how bad it gets. It's really hard to do. It's a habit that's, it's very hard to break the habit of fighting your panic attack. Habits in general are very hard to break, and I'm finding that this whole quest to overcome my anxiety is all about habits. It really is habits and lifestyle, and you have to learn to break those things that feed the anxiety. You have to learn to do things and try things without knowing whether you can do it or not. If you don't do something because you're not sure if you can do it, you'll never do it. You have to put yourself out there a little bit, go outside your comfort zone, and I did. I feel better about anxiety than I did before. Even though it's still debilitating, I still feel better about it. My level of confidence is increasing. You're going to have a lot of setbacks, and I've had setbacks, but you learn a lot from your setbacks. Your setbacks teach you so much about your condition and about your recovery. You learn so much from your setbacks, and you're going to have them. You're going to take 3 steps forward and then 2 steps backwards. 3 steps forward, 2 steps backwards. Other times you're going to take no steps forward. You'll plateau for a while. And then all of a sudden you'll progress again. And that's how it's been with me. And that's really how it is for everyone. Based on my research on this and what my therapist tells me, is that it really isn't a straight line, and you have to be prepared for the setbacks. You have to accept them. And if you can accept them and know that you will learn from them, then your setbacks won't be as difficult of an experience for you. Finding ways throughout the day just to take 2 seconds to relax. You just kind of zone out for a second. You take a second to... You don't even have to close your eyes, just relax your body, take a deep breath, and just do that periodically throughout the day. And she suggested posting stickers on different things as a reminder, so that whenever I'd see the sticker, I would do the routine. And you could put the sticker on the bathroom mirror, on the refrigerator, on your computer screen, even on the rearview mirror of your car.
So easy to fix. Just, shave it, trim it, wax it. And here's the bottom line. The 70-year-old.
And if you put them in all these places, then you're likely to see the sticker throughout the day and do your routine. Because she explained what happens is, if you don't take a few seconds every so often to unwind throughout the day, your stress level builds up like this. It just keeps building up throughout the day. But if you take time to relax yourself, even if it's just for a couple seconds, several times a day, then as your stress level goes up and you take the time to relax, it goes down. And it doesn't build up to that point. And the goal of exposure therapy is to teach yourself to quit avoiding situations that bring anxiety, and also to put yourself in a situation that brings anxiety in order to learn how to desensitize to it, in order to learn how to not let those feelings scare you anymore. Because the more you experience them, and the more you go out and do the things that you were avoiding, especially if you couple it with using positive thoughts, positive thinking, relaxation techniques, breathing techniques, you can learn to not be afraid of those situations anymore. Reassociate the situations that used to bring anxiety with peace and comfort. And once you do that, I would imagine the anxiety and panic just will kind of go away on its own. And I'm finding that to be true because I can drive further and further distances now. And by driving further and further distances, I'm feeling better, and the anxiety doesn't quite scare me as much as it did, but it still does, and I have to keep doing this. When you're doing your exposure therapy, have a plan before you go out. You have a goal as to how far you want to go and where you want to go, because you really don't want to be going out aimlessly, because then you're asking yourself, well, can I get this far? How far can I get? Well, can I turn around yet? And you don't really want to do that. You want to have a goal and then try to, as hard as you can, to follow through with that goal. And the one thing that bothers me when I'm out and about and have anxiety is that my head gets floaty. I get that floaty head feeling, dizziness. And it's a scary feeling to me. But I have to remember to allow it and not fight it, and realize that that dizziness isn't going to cause me to pass out or lose control. And that is one of my fears. So anytime my head gets a bit floaty, I get more anxious. If I have a panic attack, I have to learn to say, so what? Let the panic attack happen. I can just pull over, I have my Ativan in my pocket. It's not the end of the world, and the panic attack will pass if it happens. So I have to tell myself that. Okay, so what keeps our anxiety conditions alive are negative thought patterns and beliefs. These lead to avoidance behaviors and more fear. So by continuing to avoid those situations that cause anxiety and panic, we're pretty much reinforcing those negative thoughts and beliefs that caused us to avoid those situations in the first place. A major component of recovery is to break the cycle of those negative thoughts and beliefs. Reverse them and replace them with positive and realistic thoughts and beliefs. We need to program our minds to better deal with the anxiety and panic and the situations that cause anxiety and panic in a positive, calmer, and more realistic way. So we basically need to prove our fears wrong. So here's one of the tools that I used to help me with that. I took 3 3x5 cards. With one of the cards, I thought of a few positive and realistic statements I could say to myself when I'm anxious or panicking to help teach my mind to deal with it in a constructive way. Such as, these are just examples here of what I wrote. These are coping statements, and some of the ones I wrote, as you can see on the card. I can handle this. I've made it through before. I can make it through now. Another one is, this is an opportunity to learn to cope. Another one is, so what if I panic? Big damn deal. If I panic, it will pass, and I'll feel much better soon. I know my pattern. And this one relates more to the driving. I can pull over, relax, take Ativan if I have to. And of course, your statements can be whatever you want them to be. Whatever you would tell yourself to talk yourself through an anxiety or panic episode. Just think of the things that you would say to yourself to talk yourself through an episode. Okay? Then I took the last 2 cards and thought of some negative thoughts and beliefs that run through my mind during anxiety and panic that I have about the symptoms in the situation I'm in. and I wrote what the logical, realistic, and appropriate responses should be to those anxious thoughts and beliefs. Again, here's some examples, some ones that I wrote. So for me, dizziness is a symptom that bothers me during an attack. Okay? And my fear is that I'm going to faint. And my coping statement to that is, it's only anxiousness. It will pass and I will not faint. Okay? And then tiredness is another symptom that can make things worse for me. And on my coping card, I write, I'll still be able to function. I will make it home just fine. Because one of my fears associated with the tiredness is that I wouldn't be able to function enough to get home. It's totally irrational. I know logically that wouldn't happen, but my mind fears it and creates anxiety based on that. So if I can tell myself what I wrote, I'll still be able to function, I will make it home just fine. If I can get my mind to believe that, it'll make things better. The other symptom that really bothers me during an attack, it is the most distressing symptom to me, and that's a non-physical symptom. It's the panicky thoughts that happen during a panic attack that are the most distressing to me. These are the ones I have the hardest time with. So, my coping statement that I would tell myself to talk myself through the panicky thoughts is, slow down, don't fight, distract or close eyes if need be, relax all muscles, maintain normal breathing, I will be okay. My other statement to that would be, my mind is tricking me. Let's allow those thoughts to escape into the air. Allow and flow. Accept that they may return again. And that's important because we have to be able to accept that our panic will return. These coping cards are valuable to carry around with you. So when you have an anxiety or panic attack, you can whip them out and read them to yourself. I would say it's especially important to use these coping cards in conjunction with your exposure therapy. It'll make your exposure therapy, I would say, easier to handle because you have these coping cards you can whip out and refer to. Because exposure therapy is extremely important in overcoming your anxiety condition. And having the coping cards is another valuable tool that you can use to help that process of recovery along. You should review those cards anyway, regularly, so that by reading them over and over, your mind will begin to believe it and you'll begin to adopt a new way of thinking. After a while, it'll become automatic and you won't have to read them anymore. It's working for me. I'm gradually learning to reverse my negative thinking and beliefs. You know, it takes practice, persistence, patience, and time to reverse negative thinking. And I'm doing this by using these cards and continuing with my exposure therapy. So give it a try and I'll bet you it will help. So I'm going to be talking more about exposure therapy, but I'm going to be talking about expanding on your exposure therapy, doing more than just one thing. I'm still driving and trying to push new distances, but I'm also expanding on my exposure therapy by practicing going into buildings, including grocery stores. If there's multiple things that you have anxiety about, you know, if it's not just one thing that's bugging you, but if there's a lot of different things, then it's good to vary your exposure therapy. Do different kinds of it, mix it up. Expand on your repertoire, because you don't want to just get stuck on one thing. Like I had kind of been stuck on just doing the driving thing, getting comfortable with that first, which in a way was the right thing to do because, you know, in order to start challenging stores, I would have, you know, I had to become comfortable driving there first. Then once I could do that, then I could go into the grocery store. But now that I can at least drive to most places within town without too much problem, now I have to work on the grocery stores and other buildings and such. By avoiding the situations that you were avoiding because of the anxiety, you're only going to perpetuate your condition. You're basically reinforcing within yourself that you can't do it, that you can't handle it, and that's not true. You can handle it, and you can face it. You just have to prove to yourself that you can do it. And you do that by going out, forcing yourself to go out. You know, if you don't reach your goal, that's okay. It happens. But you want to start out at least not feeling a whole lot of anxiety. You want to start out as calm as you can. Once you're in the situation, it's important to actually feel anxiety when you're out and about, because it allows you to work through those feelings, the discomfort. So having the anxiety while you're out is what you want. It really is what you want, because once you start facing it and learn how to deal with those feelings, then the anxiety, you know, it allows you to then go further and further and further than you used to be able to. You know, desensitizing yourself, going out, and then reinforcing the positive thinking that you want to replace, because it's the negative thinking that got you into the anxiety in the first place. So by reversing that negative thinking, you can replace it with positive thinking, and then going out becomes easier and easier. Okay, well now I'm getting ready to go into a grocery store, and this is just for exposure therapy. I'm not going to buy anything. I'm just going to walk in, see how I feel in there, see how the anxiety does, and you know, it's been months since I've been able to go into a grocery store. So here it goes. And, by the way, this is a small to medium-sized grocery store compared to, you know, some of the superstores that exist nowadays. So, yep, this is all part of the exposure therapy. You know, you do a little driving, and then you do something else that challenges your anxiety, and just mix it up. You know, get some variety in there. So that's what I'm about to do. I'm about to go in this grocery store. All right, here it goes.
Too bad. Deeper into the store. Feeling a little anxiety.
Okay, well, all in all, it went very well, and as you saw, I got pretty far into the store, but I didn't go all the way back. I couldn't quite go all the way back in there. Didn't have the courage to do it, but you saw that I got in there. I started to get dizzy, and at that point, that's when I decided it was time to leave. So that's what happens. It'll be going pretty good, and then all of a sudden the dizziness comes in a flash. and that leads to instant panic. So I could feel something coming, so that was time for me to leave at that point. You're going to experience setbacks during your recovery process. But I don't want you to think that they're permanent setbacks, because they're not. What would make a relapse, I think, would be as if you had a setback and then it caused you to avoid again. So if you set up avoidance patterns again, avoidance behaviors, that's what keeps anxiety conditions alive and keeps you from getting better, are avoidance patterns and behaviors. So the difference between setbacks that I'm having now and setbacks that I've, a few months ago, is that now that I'm more recovered and now that I have more tools to deal with the anxiety and learn not to let these setbacks make me think that I'm permanently set back. It feels like I've been set back several months, literally. It does feel that way on the surface. But a few months ago, had I woken up like I did this morning, I wouldn't have been able to even think about going out. But today I did get out, and it actually felt kind of good getting out. But with all the heightened anxiety, I'm just telling myself it's just a trick of the nerves. I'm not experiencing any kind of permanent setback because I'm not going to let it set up avoidance behaviors in me. Because if I were to suddenly, get freaked out by this horrible recent anxiety that I've had this week, and I started avoiding things again, then that would be considered a relapse, but I'm not. I have the courage and strength to at least try to go on with my day when something like this happens. And it's working pretty good. I'm out. If you don't feel like leaving the house because of it, at least get out and do something. Even if you had plans to, like I did for today, to go out and do some big things with your exposure therapy, instead of staying home and relinquishing control to your anxiety condition, at least do something. Do the very best you can, and that's what I've done. Not give my anxiety condition any more power than it already has over me. Really trying to control the anxiety and not let the anxiety control me. So that's the whole point. Well, today is the day that I attempt my first drive an hour away from home. I'm going to attempt this. This is part of my exposure therapy, just continually trying to push the bounds. I'm hoping I can do this, despite having gotten very little sleep the last 2 nights. I'm on my way up to Pope Valley, a remote area where I lived as a young child. If you find that the anxiety becomes intolerable as you're pushing on, then it's a good idea to retreat. That's part of the graduated exposure, is expose yourself to the anxiety, allow yourself to experience it, retreat if necessary. And the purpose of retreating is to give yourself a little break, use some self-talk to bring your anxiety level down. And then once you've brought your anxiety level down, go back into the situation and keep going as far as you can go. And repeat if necessary. So once you've gone back into it, you feel the high levels of anxiety start to get unbearable. When you start reaching the point of, as you're close to a panic attack, retreat. Bring the anxiety levels down by doing deep breathing, relaxing all the muscles of your body, and self-talk. It's very important that you use reaffirming and positive statements to counter your negative thinking. That's the whole idea, is to counter your negative thoughts. Get your mind to stop believing those negative thoughts, because your mind is gullible. It'll believe any suggestions that come about. So we need to start replacing those negative suggestions with positive suggestions. I am 20 minutes into my drive now, and so far I'm not feeling much anxiety. at least as of now. I had a little anticipatory anxiety like right before I left, but I'm just trying to got my nice relaxing music on and trying to go into this as relaxed as I can, but at the same time allow myself to feel any anxiety or anxious thoughts that come up, and then when they do, I can try and kill them with positive reinforcement and relaxation and retreating if necessary. In my case today, if I needed to retreat, I would be simply pulling off the road, acknowledging my anxiety, deep breathing, relaxing my body, and countering my negative thoughts by replacing them with realistic and positive thoughts to bring my anxiety level down. Then I would continue to drive. I am 45 minutes into my drive. I have 15 more minutes to go before my endpoint. And I just feel a slight amount of anxiety, but nothing that I can't handle, definitely. I've not had to pull over yet. I've not had to retreat or really use much relaxation techniques because I seem to be with it okay. But I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the anxiety anytime it wants to pop up. I'm ready to shoot it down. And I'm just going to keep pushing toward my goal. And nothing was going to stop me today from achieving my goal. I am at my hour point, and I'm actually in a neighborhood that I grew up in till I was 6 years old. Yep, this is way out in the country, way out in the sticks. It's beautiful out here, very remote. Anyway, no cell phone reception. Here, let's take a little look around. That right there is the house that I grew up in. That was 26 years ago, 24 years ago. Yeah, the house doesn't quite look the same. It's all boarded up in front. But my dad built that garage right over there when I was just 4 or 5 years old. Yep. Yep, a lot of memories here, for sure. Yep, a lot of memories here. Well, I'm glad I came out here, you know? Not just for exposure therapy, but for, you know, a little reminiscing too. It's a really special place. As you know, I've landed a job. A part-time job working in a hotel. I start in 2 days. But I'm a nervous wreck. Even for people without anxiety disorders, a new job makes them nervous. You know, the anxious part of my mind is not knowing what to expect and how my anxiety disorder is going to play out at my new job. You know, my anxious mind is thinking, what will my new boss be like? My coworkers? Will I panic? So I made a special appointment to see my therapist to discuss my concerns and anxieties about this new job. And also to go over everything my therapist has taught me thus far as coping and dealing with anxiety and panic. I needed to be reminded of all the tools I've learned. I made a list of them. So this is the list of tools that I have that I'm going to use to make sure that I can deal with it better and that I have a higher chance of success at this. And so this is just everything I've already learned, and I wanted to make a list, though, of everything I've learned so that I can refer to it and remind myself of what I've learned. So, these are the things that I'm doing. So, number one is reminding myself of how far I've come. And then, of course, there's always the self-talk that we've talked about before. And it's the realistic self-talk. Alright, so examples of this would be, this is not a medical emergency. I'm okay. I'm familiar with the tasks. because I am. This is a hotel job. I've been working hotel jobs for 7 years, so this is definitely something that I'm familiar with. Okay, so there's the other thing. It's the thought stoppage. So when you feel an anxiety attack or panic attack coming on, you want to stop it in its tracks. So you just want to, so in my case, if this happens to me, I'll tell my mind to stop. So thought stoppage. Intervene when things feel like they're getting out of hand. Okay, let's see. The other thing is, okay, have a little change of scenery. That's another thing. You want to kind of break up the monotony of what you're doing, but if you feel an attack coming on, you just do little things like get up, go to the bathroom, get some water, but you want to change your scene, your visual scene. If you can, walk around. And walking around also, as you know, burns up adrenaline, so that gets rid of some of the physical response to the anxiety that you're feeling. Now, the therapist also mentioned, changing. So if there's music playing, maybe change the music that you're listening to. So you just want to bring yourself into a new, change your environment as much as you can when you do feel the anxiety, because that will help with that. And then of course the physical tools to break the cycle of anxiety and panic. If you have your tranquilizer, maybe bring it. I'm going to bring it, in my case, bring it with me. Carry a photo, something you can pull out of your wallet and look at, to break the cycle of anxiety, panic. A picture of something that makes you happy or that makes you feel comfortable. Bring your coping cards, the cards that have your self-talk statements and whatnot. And then of course there are physical exercises that you can do, and I mentioned already getting up, walking around. My therapist taught me a tense and release method where you tense your muscles like this and then you release. Tense and release. Tense and release. And then there's also of course relaxation. Just relax all the muscles of your body and do your deep breathing. And these are the tools that I'm going to bring with me to my new job. So, and there are things I can do now to minimize the anticipatory anxiety by thinking positive and telling myself that it's going to work out just fine. Because realistically, I'm probably going to do better than I expect. It seems to be the case. We always tend to catastrophize and think the worst. So just a few preparations, deep breathing, and use all these tools too that I'm going to bring with me to the job. I can start using these right now. Now that I saw the therapist, my anxiety level has diminished somewhat. I even called my new boss to ask more questions about the job, to relieve some of the anxieties related to the unknowns. Now that I know more, I'm not quite as anxious. So I've got 2 days before I start my new job. I'm still anxious and nervous, but I have faith in myself. After all, I have exceeded my expectations before. The time is here, and today is going to be my first day at my new job. Well, I didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night. I mean, I did sleep some, but very lightly because of the nervousness. And then I did pretty good yesterday. I did a lot to keep my mind busy, and did fairly good. Went to bed last night, and that's where the anxiety started hitting me again about today, about my new job. And it took me forever to fall asleep, and then once asleep, just slept very lightly. And then this morning when I woke up, I was underslept. In fact, underslept enough that it kind of made me not care, or kind of made me too tired to really be nervous. And I went to my regular therapy appointment today, and we just kind of went over my concerns one more time before I start, and told her about obviously what's going on in my life. And So yeah, you can probably tell I'm very nervous. I'm not as I normally carry myself in my videos. I'm kind of hard to think straight. So I actually leave for work in about an hour, a little less than an hour. And once I got home from my therapy appointment, I still was doing remarkably well with not having too much anticipatory anxiety, even though it was on my mind. I still, kept myself busy. But now that it's getting closer, I'm feeling like pretty heavy rushes of anxiety. And I even a few minutes ago went and listened to a self-hypnosis CD about anxiety. And it was just really hard to relax. My anxiety is now getting so strong that it's hard. It's just hard. I'm trying to use my tools. I'm trying to let it float past, but that's kind of hard to do. And so right now I have to start getting ready for my new job. So I got to eat something and get dressed and get my stuff together. So I'm feeling not enthused, I would say, because of the anxiety. The anxiety is just taking all my enthusiasm about my new job away. But I was warned that my first day is going to be pretty, going to be tough with the anxiety. It's going to be pretty hard, no matter how you cut it, because I have been off of work for almost a year, and this is probably my big step. So I'm trying to hold myself together. It's not easy to do, though. Well, off to eat something and get dressed and get my stuff together. Somebody make me smile. Make a sandwich. Something. Complex carbohydrates, my therapist says, like whole wheat, is a serotonin booster. I'm hoping she's right. Really hoping she's right. Breathing, I'm breathing. I'm breathing. I'm trying to tell myself that I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I'm trying to hold it together emotionally. Anxiety's starting to get so strong it's hard to stay together emotionally. So I'm just packing my bag here, with everything that I'm going to bring with me to my job. Got my Ativan, of course. I know I don't sound as positive as I normally do, but that's just because I'm just got so much anxiety on my mind. Yeah. Oh, I gotta pack a lunch too. Not sure what I'm gonna bring. It's I'm hungry, but the anxiety is squashing my appetite, just totally squashing my appetite. Oh, yeah, stomach's in knots. Okay. So my therapist told me that anything I do today is a success, no matter what the outcome is. Whether I fail or not, everything I do is a success. Okay, well, I am now dressed and ready for work. Just have to pack, a nice dinner. Well, my anxiety level right now is a little better, and I leave in about 20 minutes. And my anxiety is still, fluctuating quite a bit. I'll have moments where I'm feeling okay and more together, and then moments where I'm not. Well, anyhow, I'm leaving in a little bit here, so. Alright, here it is. Time to go. Time to go to work. First day. Yeah. A lot of nervousness, but not quite as intense as it was before I left. So it's about a 10-minute ride over there. Anyway, gotta go because I gotta fill out my papers, my I-9 and W-2s and all that. So I gotta get there a little early. Well, I'm nearly there, and my jitters are coming back. Oh yeah, they are coming back. Anyway, parking spot. Oh man, I'm telling you. Whew. I am anxious as hell. Well, wish me luck. I won't be able to bring my camera in there with me, but alright. I'll report back later. Alright, so my first day, how did it go? Well, my first day actually went well. In fact, better than expected. You know, but then again I was distracted by learning the job and everything, so only time will tell, really, how things are going to go. Well, you may have noticed that before I left for my job, I was extremely anxious. In fact, I had another problem that came about from that extreme anxiety. Some of us, if the anxiety gets too strong, we can actually become emotional. We could start to cry, and I was trying to fight that because I definitely didn't want to go in there, you know, all in shambles. So, because that wouldn't have looked very good on my first day. So I was trying to hold together emotionally, you could tell. But once I was in the car, I felt a little better. But then as I got closer to the hotel, then I started getting extremely anxious again. And then as soon as I walked in, it wasn't extreme anxiety anymore. It was just plain nervousness about the job. And once I put my stuff down, sat down, and started getting trained, then my mind was now focused on learning the job, and I did not really become anxious throughout that 5-hour shift, which is great. However, there were a couple times where my mind started, you know, my mind started getting tired from learning all this stuff, and you get tired, and then your mind drifts off, and then that's when the anxiety can hit again. I got a couple anxious thoughts that came into my mind, kind of in the middle of the shift, where I felt like I could get anxious if I let my guard down too much. But again, dealing with anxiety is about letting it flow. If it's going to happen, let it happen, but try to intervene if you can anyway, you know, by doing your breathing or other tools, but at the same time allowing whatever happens to happen. Because what happens is not dangerous. It may be uncomfortable, but not dangerous. So when I got off work, I was very tired. I was worn out, both physically and mentally, from having to learn the new job. But also the extreme, and I do mean extreme, anticipatory anxiety that I had before I went in wore me down considerably, and I hadn't gotten a whole lot of sleep the night before. I've got some anticipatory anxiety yet again today, but so far it hasn't been quite as strong as yesterday's. And only time will tell. You know, a hobby or an interest that you might have is a wonderful tool in your battle against anxiety, especially if it gets you out of the house. If it gets you out and about, which is what you should be doing in your battle as part of your exposure therapy. So, something that you might be interested in that gets you out. It also provides a wonderful distraction. In my view, and just remember, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a mental health professional, I have no training in the subject. Everything I say about it is just based from my own experience of having an anxiety disorder. And from what I understand, you know, distractions are great because it gives you something else to think about rather than dwelling on the anxiety and dwelling on any strange feelings you may be having as a result of the anxiety. However, you have to remember, though, that while distraction is great, you don't want to distract yourself too much from the anxiety, because part of your overcoming anxiety is that you face the anxiety, you feel the feelings, you feel the anxiety, you work through those feelings, you work through the anxiety attack, and you work through that, and then when your anxiety attack resolves, that's part of the desensitization process, is feeling the anxiety, facing it, feeling it, working through it, and then letting it resolve, whether or not you're retreating from the situation to let it resolve. But But basically, you're working through it. And then the other thing is your hobby or interest also serves as a goal. So, you know, because part of your recovery process is setting goals and working toward meeting those goals. You know, it gives yourself something to work toward. So, for example, let's just say that your interest or hobby is the outdoors. You like to go hiking, and the nearest spot to go hiking requires, say, a 30-minute drive, you know, to one of the best hiking spots. Okay. But yet you can't quite do that 30-minute drive for, you know, because of your anxieties. It gives you something to work toward. Your hobby is helping lead yourself away from your anxiety. And your hobby or interest could be anything that gets you out. Anything that challenges your anxiety. I mean, having a hobby or interest is good anyway, no matter what. My hobby was making videos. And that's what I did, and that's what has helped me to lead myself away from it, because it gave me some things to work toward. You know, I would go out and do documentaries about the town that I live in, but it was really hard for me to leave the house because the anxiety was so bad. So it gave me some things to do. It gave me some goals to focus on and work toward, and then once I met those goals, then I upped the ante a little bit. I expand my territory. So now I went and started a business, and that's pretty big for somebody with an anxiety disorder, I think. My videography might take me into neighboring communities too, which means I spend more time away from home, and that's something else to work toward, even though I can do it now. And I might have some discomfort sometimes, but it's good, because I need to you know, enjoy my hobby at the same time, but also put myself outside my comfort zone so I can challenge and overcome the anxiety. So that's what it's all about, I think. It's completely natural to want quick and easy answers to a problem. You know, you have a problem that's affecting your life in a profoundly negative way, and you want answers. You want answers now. You want to know, how can I fix this immediately? What can I do to cure myself? And it's not unreasonable to be seeking those answers. So I don't want to burst your bubble by telling you this, but overcoming anxiety, you know, for those of you who are, you know, just tuning in, who maybe haven't seen all of my videos, or who just joined me, or who may be feeling lost and confused about what to do, is there is no overnight cure to anxiety. And that is an honest answer. So that's the bad news. Okay, but the good news is you can definitely overcome it with the correct therapy tools. Patience, it takes courage, and it takes time. How much time, you might ask? Well, that depends on your individual situation, and you know, everybody is going to recover at their own paces. Depends what kind of therapy tools you're using, how well you're using them, how much time you're spending using your tools, practicing, getting out, doing exposure therapy. Short answer to your question, how do I overcome this? Well, the first thing that I always suggest to people, and of course I always tell everybody that I am not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a mental health professional, or a medical professional in any way, shape, or form. I've simply suffered from this, and I'm still suffering from this, and I'm working to overcome it. And I come to you through these videos just from my experiences in overcoming anxiety myself. So, the first thing... Alright, and you're like, get to it already. Okay, so the first thing that I always recommend to people is see a therapist. And I know they can be very expensive, and that is a limiting factor for a lot of people. And it's a limiting factor for me too. It's incredibly expensive. I pay $125 an hour to see a therapist. But here's the good news, is that maybe you have insurance that will cover therapy visits, therapy sessions. You know, with with insurance that can cut way down on the cost, so making it easier for people to seek therapy. But if you can afford it, if you have the insurance to do so, my answer to you is get a therapist. That was my first line of defense. Was I went and saw a therapist right away before my anxiety condition drove me deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So therapy really helped save me. And I'm seeing somebody who employs cognitive behavioral therapy. And from what I understand, that's a very effective therapy, and it seems to have worked for me. I've come this far in my recovery. If you can find someone affordable who doesn't do cognitive behavioral therapy, hey, why not? Do it. You got to do something to help yourself. Some therapy, I would imagine, is better than none at all. Alright, so I would say, at the very, very least, if you can't get to a therapist for any reason, and I would say even if you can get to a therapist, there are some books that I think will help you, that have helped me. Okay, here's the first book that I read. It's called The Anxiety and Phobia Workbook by Dr. Edmund Bourne. It's a workbook. See, it's got worksheets in here. It's got exercises, overcoming anxiety exercises, teaches you a lot of tools you'll need to overcome anxiety effectively. And it's real, it gives you the real lowdown on overcoming anxiety. Okay, and it's a wonderful book. It says here, practical step-by-step directions for mastery of relaxation, exercise, coping with panic, exposure, overcoming negative self-talk, changing mistaken beliefs, visualization, self-esteem, nutrition, medication. The medication, from what I'm understanding, is you want to, my therapist has told me that medication for me is kind of a last line of defense, because you really do need the tools, the coping tools, and the ability to relax your mind and body, I think, is very important in the whole thing. Meditation techniques, anxiety triggering health conditions, and that's what this book covers. It goes over all of these things. It will definitely help you get a handle on things, and it really helped me out. And it's a great supplement to the therapist I'm seeing. So definitely a must. It's a holistic approach, because really your mind and body are connected. Physical conditions can exaggerate anxiety problems or bring them out. I think that maybe even some physical conditions can cause anxiety disorders too. Another book is by the late Dr. Claire Weeks, Hope and Help for Your Nerves. Another wonderful book. And this book does have, it does talk about electroshock therapy, which obviously is not used anymore, but the basic idea of this book makes sense, and this will also help you get a handle on your anxiety. It'll get you thinking more realistically about what your anxiety condition is and what recovery means, what recovery involves, what it's all about. It just gets you thinking realistically about your thought processes that can lead to a panic attack and anxiety. So another must read. Okay, another book. This is also by the same author, the late Dr. Claire Weeks, More Help for Your Nerves. This is a slightly newer edition. I haven't read this one yet, but I'm told it's also great, so I've got this yet to read. So, definitely consider getting those books. It talks about what recovery involves. It takes a commitment, it takes disciplining yourself to go out, do your exercises, not get lazy about it, and I've been guilty about that myself. Courage, determination, and patience. You got to be patient with yourself and not try to rush it. Just be patient with yourself. And it also takes tools to overcome anxiety. Coping tools, the ability to relax your mind and body. You want to develop your capacity to relax. And that's just a few things involved in recovery. And of course there's medication, but in my opinion medication is just a band-aid that covers up the real problem. And like my therapist has told me, medication perhaps should be a last line of defense, but and it depends on your situation. Maybe you've got anxiety so bad that you need medication so that you can at least use it to get to a point where you can start on the road to recovery. I don't know. It's all going to depend on your individual situation. You need to consult with your therapist, or doctor before considering medication. Well, obviously you'd have to see them first before getting prescribed. So if your anxiety and panic is negatively affecting your life or quality of life, you need to take action. Develop an arsenal of tools to overcome it. That's what you need. The more tools you have, the better. So get therapy from someone if you can. Get these books, and realize that recovery is definitely doable and practical, but you got to put your mind to it, not get discouraged or feeling hopeless. And even if you are, it might feel hopeless to you. It felt hopeless to me, but it's not a hopeless situation. Our mind is a very powerful thing, very powerful. With anxiety, our mind either gets us into the anxiety disorder, or it perpetuates our anxiety disorders. Our anxiety disorders. So if our minds can get us into the anxiety disorders, and if it can keep us in the depths of our anxiety disorders, then we can use our minds to get out of it. Our mind is a very, very powerful tool. If used properly, it can get us into trouble, but our minds can also get us out of trouble. So with all the energy that we spend inadvertently, maybe unconsciously, perpetuating our anxiety disorders or getting into the anxiety disorders, let's use that energy to get out of our anxiety disorders. That's what therapy is all about, is retraining our mind, reconditioning our mind to look at the situations that bring anxiety differently, and to look at the anxiety itself differently, that it's not dangerous. It's severely uncomfortable when we have a panic attack, but we can use our minds to not be afraid of it should a panic attack happen. Like my therapist has always told me, the goal is not to avoid having a panic attack. The goal is to learn to deal with it and not be afraid of it, which I believe ultimately that means that once you lose your fear of the anxiety and the panic, that it just won't happen. I think we psych ourselves into, we're so afraid of having a panic attack or anxiety attack that we psych ourselves into having one. And so, at least that's part of it, I think. Flow with it and deal with it and not run away from it. That's the big thing, is not to run away from it. I don't run away from it as much. We all need a break. All of us need breaks from anything we do in life. We work long hours at our jobs. We need breaks. We need little breaks in between, like lunch breaks, bathroom breaks. But we also need vacations from our long work days, our long work schedules. Well, really it's no different with our anxiety and panic disorders. We all need a place that we can go to, whether it's real or whether it's in our minds. A place that we can go to where we can temporarily forget about everything, all of our worries, where we can let go, where we can let go of everything. I think it's very important to have this. Actually, we all need that. We all need a mental break from the stresses we go through in our everyday lives. So it's not just for anxiety and panic disorders. That goes for any part of life. We all need a break. We all need a place that we can go to in our minds or in actuality where we can let go of our stresses and temporarily forget about everything. This could be anything, really. I think it's great to have both. I think it's great to have a place that you can go to in your mind. So if you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, you can find a way to shut off, to take a break. You close your eyes and you imagine yourself in a happy place. That's your escape. You could fantasize about a beautiful place that just makes you feel happy. And concentrate on it. Close your eyes and be there. Pretend you're there. And it's good, I think, to have an actual place to go to if you can, to escape. Maybe it's a park of some sort, a natural area where it's just you and nature. Whatever it is, use it. I was also taught that it's not good to distract yourself all the time from the anxiety, because you want to, if you're in the process of overcoming it, you want to actually face it. You actually want to face the anxiety and deal with it. I'm just talking about temporary distractions. Giving yourself a break. And not only escaping to these places when you're having anxiety. This could be a regular part of your meditation that you do. Where you go out somewhere and meditate. Or you meditate at home and go someplace in your mind. But I think it's important to have a place to escape to, temporarily. I mean, we all have to come back to reality and deal with things. And you don't want to totally ignore your anxiety either, all the time. But, yeah, I think giving ourselves a break is extremely important. Regular breaks. Maybe something you could do every day. Maybe for half hour every day, just close your eyes. Go someplace in your mind. And if you have a special place that you go to, go. Maybe not every day, but go to it. Go to it regularly. But it's about breaking your life down into steps. Don't try to deal with everything at once, if you don't have to. Just try to take life one day at a time. Like right now, I'm in my special place. I really don't have to worry about anything until I get home. About what I'm going to, about working, doing some work in my business. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff right now. Because what happens is your stress levels build up and build up and accumulate, and you have to have some release from that. Meditation, go into your special place so that you can bring that level down. So you can sort of like start fresh again. We have to break the cycle of the stress buildup. This is important. And one thing I did, you might have seen my other video about, I released a relaxation DVD. Originally I was just going to make this sort of stuff for myself, and I thought, well, I'd like to share it with others. So now I'm selling relaxation material. Most of us know that music influences our mood, and hence how we feel. Music that we find relaxing naturally brings your anxiety and stress levels down, which is, I'd say, tantamount to overcoming anxiety, because we need to develop the capacity to relax ourselves, to relax our mind and our body. Obviously there's meditation, there's regular relaxation, and I think what does kind of go along with that is regularly listening to music that makes us feel good. When we feel good, it can kind of override the psychological impact of the stressors in our lives. So I think music is very important. I think it's very important. But of course, this is all obvious. I mean, we all know this. It's just that we tend to forget these little things. We get so wrapped up in our lives, and we get so caught up in whatever's bothering us, that we tend to forget these little things. You're going to hear from 3 people who I'm very close to, who I love and care about very much, and who volunteered to come on camera to talk about my progress that I've made. But before we get to that, let's just talk about how I've been doing. And in case you haven't been following all of my episodes, I'm a small business owner. I'm a very busy person, and overcoming anxiety requires time and effort. And recovery is a product of the time and effort that you put into recovery. And I haven't had a lot of free time this last 3 years because I've been running a business, so I haven't been I would say the last year or two I haven't put as much as I could into it because I've been working very hard to earn money. And I've kind of left myself very little time for therapy and recovery. So I haven't progressed this last year or two as much as I could have directly because of that, because I haven't been able to put a lot of time into exposure therapy and other things. But with that said, I do try to squeeze in exposure therapy whenever I can, whenever I'm able to. You know, I still have to live life. I still have to go to the office supply store to pick up my office supplies for running the business. And so that I pretty much overcame the anxiety that I used to feel going into that store. And that has a spillover effect into other aspects of agoraphobia, other situations where we might feel it might trigger an anxiety attack or a panic attack. So despite the fact that I haven't put a lot of time into recovery the last year or two, I've still seen some improvement, additional improvement. And I am nowhere near fully recovered, but I've come a very long ways. I mean, as you're about to hear from my parents and my wife, the anxiety really doesn't rule my life on a day-to-day basis anymore. So I go out and I do my things, and I hardly give anxiety a second thought. Now, with that said, there are still times where, not too often, but there are still times here and there where I'll go out, you know, running my errands, doing my things, and I'll experience a fair amount of anxiety when I'm out and about. But it doesn't scare me anymore, at least not the way it used to, and it doesn't progress to a full-blown panic attack. There was one time recently where I was in the office supply store. I was very tired, and I think I was very susceptible to anxiety attack that day, and I started having panic thoughts. But I've learned tools to give those panicky thoughts less importance so that they don't rule me. They don't dictate that I'm going to run out the door right now. Any anxiety or panicky thoughts that I may have don't rule me the way they used to. And I think that's a hallmark of recovery. So I found that any attacks that I have had are much fewer and further between. I don't have them as often anymore. So that's where I stand. That's where I currently stand. Gosh, I would give it maybe 80-85% recovery from my agoraphobia. And again, where I stand now is I've kind of evened out. I've kind of plateaued in my recovery. And again, I could have been fully recovered a very long time ago had I put the effort and time into recovery this last year or two. And that's the point I want to get across to you, is that your recovery is a direct result of putting time and effort into recovery. I still have very large buildings to deal with that still are difficult, but they've gotten easier for me. And so I'm sure a lot of you have wondered, well, how come you've been doing this for years and you're not fully recovered still? And again, it's just because I haven't put the time into it. Because instead, I've been working a lot, trying to earn money. But I've recovered enough right now that I can operate on a day-to-day basis without anxiety being in the way or being really much of an issue at all. So that's that. I really hope that someday I will have the time to finish this off and get this done. Well, I have with me my papa, my dad, who has seen my progress over the last 2 or 3 years since I started this overcoming anxiety recovery effort. So you've seen my progress. We've done some hypnosis. We've worked together on this. You've seen progress in my battle of overcoming anxiety.
I have seen your progress, and you've done remarkably well over the last few years. Going from a place of
Couldn't leave the apartment.
You couldn't leave. You couldn't leave your car, and now you travel. And you do just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Coming all the way to see me, there's no problem. The fact is,
2 hours.
fact is, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you had no problem with anxiety.
Yes. You might recall I was on the radio last year at some point, and the host had no idea that I had any problem with anxiety. He's like, "Are you kidding?" So I guess I haven't outwardly shown it, but when I'm, of course, in a phobic situation, then you'll notice it. However, you've seen changes in me, and I've done well. Obviously, in the last year or two, I've made very little progress, but only because I haven't put the effort into it. Because recovery from an anxiety disorder requires effort, time and effort. And if you don't put the effort into it, you're not going to see a lot of recovery. So that's why it's been a little slow, but at least you've seen it over the last 3 years.
Progress is progress. And Rome wasn't built overnight, and
Right.
you're dealing effectively with this and doing the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
or the right things.
Yeah. So I'm on the right path.
You're on the right path.
Mm-hmm. Just need to find the time to put more effort into it so that I can
Mhm.
then tackle airports and shopping malls and bigger stores.
But I think the real mark of it is that you are happy with who you are, and that's the whole goal, is to be happy with who you are.
Yes.
And you're doing your best every day, and best can vary from day to day.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And let me say this, that I wasn't always happy with who I am, and having gone through this journey of overcoming the anxiety disorder, I've learned to be happy with who I am. So I am now happy with who I am, and I've learned to accept some of the challenges that I have in front of me, such as overcoming anxiety. I can still be happy with who I am, even though that there are things to work on, because we all have something in our lives that we need to work on. So being happy with who you are despite any shortcomings, but you know that you have stuff to work on, and the first step is, or a very helpful step, is to be happy with who you are.
And as your dad, I'm very happy with who you are too.
Well, thank you, Papa. That means a lot to
You
me.
have turned out well,
Yeah,
in spite of me.
in spite of you. Always the jokester.
Always a jokester.
Always, but you know,
that's
humor
true.
humor gets you through it.
It can
Humor
help a lot.
helps. It does. It does. Absolutely.
So this is an ongoing thing, our
Mhm.
journey through life, and we try to make improvements all the time. Sometimes big steps, sometimes little steps, but they're steps.
Steps are steps.
Mhm.
Progress is progress.
That's right.
Yeah, and in my case, it's been slow, but again, there's a goal, and got to keep that goal in mind. So thank you for joining me, Mom, on Skype tonight. And this is my mom. She's in New Mexico. I'm in Napa, California, and we are states apart. We're pretty far geographically apart from each other, but she's joining me on Skype, and we're talking about how she thinks I'm doing in my road to recovery. I know my face looks a little dark. You can barely see me. But anyway, so Ma, you've seen me a few times over the years, and so you've seen some improvement in me in talking to me on the phone, and what you've seen visually in visiting.
Yeah, I'd say so. The last time I saw you, you were trying trying to force yourself to do things that were a little uncomfortable for you, like going into a grocery store and going back to the back of it, and you managed to get back there, but you hurriedly made an exodus as soon as you had gone to the back. And during that time, even when I wasn't there, I could tell from talking to you on the phone, because you talked a lot about,
Yeah.
different things that made you anxious and so on.
Yeah.
And in the last probably year or so, I barely ever heard you even mention anxiety. So that seems to tell me, that it's not running your life, that you're able to in some way control it, or maybe not even feel it at times. I'm not sure, because it's never been something, I'm sure a person can't really understand it unless they experience it themselves. But
That's right.
I've definitely noticed that there's been a huge decrease in the number of experiences that you've told me about lately. It seems like, from the things that you tell me, that you're living a pretty normal life. And it didn't seem like for quite a while there that, you were able to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It isn't running my life anymore, but I do occasionally still feel anxiety. I was at Staples the other day, for example, buying office supplies, and I had some panicky thoughts enter my head, and I haven't had panicky thoughts in a while, but I dealt with it. I've learned tools to cope with that, and it didn't take hold. Those panicky feelings are less important to me now than they used to be. So, it doesn't take hold. It doesn't cause me to start new avoidance patterns, which then leads to reconditioning the mind toward anxious thoughts, prevailing anxious thoughts when you're out and about. So yeah. So one thing that Dad mentioned in this Q&A session that we're doing here, he says that when he sees me and talks to me, that on the surface he would never know that I suffer from anxiety. What is your thought about that?
From talking to you on the phone, and from just knowing that the things that you're doing now, that it seems like you were kind of reluctant to do before, and it just seems like, there's no indication, generally speaking, that you're having any problems with anxiety.
Right.
Not to say that you might not feel them at times, but you're either somehow controlling them, or making it so that it's not obvious to the people you're talking to, or people, that you're around.
Yeah. I don't go out of my way to hide it. I think I'm just good at managing it, and I don't feel it as often as I used to. I've gotten to a point where I can live a mostly normal life now. I may feel anxiety occasionally with things that I've already overcome, but like I said, those feelings are less important to me, and I can cope. I know how to cope with that now, and it comes and it goes. A few minutes later, it's gone, and I never give it another thought. I'm to a point where if I want to continue therapy, exposure therapy, that I have to do more than what I do day to day, because I've already overcome what I do day to day. It's pretty much done. Stuff like flying, airports, shopping malls, really big places. I don't deal with those places day to day, so I haven't done any exposure therapy with those. And that's what I have left to do, and I've been so busy running the business, I haven't had time to put into therapy. In a nutshell, before we wrap this up here, so in a nutshell, you have seen you have seen a positive improvement in me.
Yeah, definitely. Just the fact that you can drive up to your dad's place, which is quite a ways away, is a big improvement from when you were having having trouble just going maybe a few miles away.
Oh, well, there was a time I couldn't even go a block away. That was almost impossible to go a block away. So yeah. And this is my wife. Thank you for being here this evening. So, you live with me. You've lived with me through my ups and my downs. You've seen me at my worst. You've seen me at my best. Yeah, you've been through the whole roller coaster ride called anxiety disorder. And you've seen everything that I've done to work to overcome it. So would you say that you've seen improvement the last 3 years? 4 years, or however long it's been since it's been going on at its worst. Yes?
Yes.
You've seen improvement?
Yes, I've seen improvement.
She doesn't like to be on camera, so she's probably going to be the briefest of all of these Q&A sessions. Okay, good. You've seen improvement. When I do have anxiety, it seems like I handle it pretty well
Yeah.
now, the
Very
days,
well. Yeah.
compared to before.
Better than before, yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. And what else can we really add to that? You're still here. We're still married.
5 years next month.
5 years next month. That's pretty good. Yeah, and you're part of my support system, as is my dad, my mom, who you've already met. So I've got a nice support system here.
Right.
Got a little ways to go before I'm fully recovered, but a big difference
Yes.
between now and then.
Big difference.
Yeah.
But yes, still ways to go.
You have hope that someday I'll be pretty
Back
much
to
fully
normal.
recovered, living a normal life as much as I can.
Right. Someday.
And it seems like I'm living a somewhat normal life now, for the most part.
For the most part.
Day to day.
Yeah.
Okay, so hope you enjoyed the video. And you might be wondering how I'm doing right now as of 2015. So, as of 2015, at this moment that I'm filming this video, January of 2015, I've actually suffered a relapse. I hate to say that I have suffered a relapse, but I blame that partly on a medical condition that I have, but I also blame it on myself. I think I allowed myself to relapse. As I explained towards the end of my video blogging, which was 2012, 2013, I think is the last segment that you saw, where I explained how I was doing after all that work I did. I reached a point where I wasn't recovering any further, but I wasn't getting worse. I'd reached a point where I was comfortable enough in my life that I got complacent, and I wasn't doing things to maintain my level of recovery. Well, actually, I did maintain that level of recovery for a couple of years after that, but I wasn't doing anything to continue to progress because I was so focused on working and earning a living that I just didn't give myself any time. So a couple of years after that last segment, I developed a medical condition recently, and I was working kind of a stressful job, and I wasn't doing anything to maintain my level of recovery, and my negative thinking patterns came back. Once I started suffering from this medical condition, I just allowed myself to spiral back downwards again. So that the negative thinking started again, and I gradually started losing my grip on the anxiety. So it became harder and harder to drive further distances from home and to do certain tasks. Like the job I was working, it was getting harder and harder to do that. I was starting to have more and more anxiety at work, and pretty much the same thing that had happened the last relapse that I had, except I didn't have a medical condition the last relapse. But this time I did, so I had more my life was more complicated, and I allowed it to happen. I do blame myself for allowing that to happen. It didn't have to happen. I could have actually been fully recovered years and years ago had I put more time into recovery. And because I worked so much and didn't give myself enough time to work on myself, I never did reach a full level of recovery, but I could have. So everything that I said in my video early, throughout the video is true about overcoming anxiety. It really can work, but for myself, I just didn't give it everything I had, and I keep falling into these patterns where I become complacent, and then I stop working on myself, and then I allow myself to slip backwards again. So learn from my mistakes, not to let a setback become a relapse. We talked about that a while back in this video here. So I'm currently seeing a therapist again. I don't consider myself back at square one because I do have the coping tools for coping with anxiety. I know the tricks and the tools and the coping strategies, and I do use them. But the medical condition that I have, though, does make coping a lot more difficult and complicated. So I'm having a tough time because of that. If it weren't for the medical condition, I'd be probably way ahead by now of regaining my grip on my anxiety disorder. I have the tools, I haven't forgotten them, and I use them, so all is not lost. And I'm not housebound, and I didn't get housebound this time. I can go out, and I'm getting myself out further and further again, once again. So I have faith that maybe I'll learn from my mistakes and not become complacent, and I'll keep moving towards a full recovery and achieve a full recovery. So that's what I wanted to say. And I hope this video has helped you and has given you some hope in your road to recovery. So best of luck to all of you.